Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Fanfic Universe. In today's episode, we explore, what if the Kyuubi's chakra fused with an ancient wolf god and turned Naruto into a celestial beast lord? Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Fissure. The river had no name on any map that mattered. It ran between two stone giants, the carved faces of the first and second Hokage, weathered by decades of rain and war and the quiet dignity of being forgotten by everyone except the people who came here to settle things that couldn't be settled anywhere else. The Valley of the End. Someone had a sense of humor when they named it, or maybe they were just honest about what the place was for. Naruto hit the water hard enough to send a shockwave across the surface, and he came up spitting and snarling, orange chakra already bleeding from his skin like something trying to escape. His headband was gone. He didn't know when he'd lost it. Sasuke stood on the water 30 feet away, and the curse mark had taken over half his face, gray and dark and spreading like rot across pale skin, and his Sharingan was burning red in the gray afternoon light. "You're going to come back," Naruto said. "Not a question." His voice was raw. "I'm not letting you go." Sasuke's expression didn't change. It never really changed anymore, not since the hospital. Not since the Sound Force showed up and Sasuke walked away like Konoha was something he was done with. But there was something underneath it now, something tight and compressed, like a spring wound past its limit. "You don't understand what I need," Sasuke said. "I don't care what you need from Orochimaru." Naruto moved, and the water exploded beneath his feet. "I care what you need from me. And you're too stubborn to ask." The Chidori crackled to life in Sasuke's hand. That sound, that horrible bird shrieking sound, had stopped being cool somewhere around the third time Naruto had seen it pointed at him. "Don't," Naruto said. Sasuke came at him anyway. They crashed together the way they always did, like two storms that had been building toward each other since the academy, since D-rank missions and ramen bets and the stupid competition that had started as a rivalry and become something neither of them had words for. Naruto's Rasengan and Sasuke's Chidori met between them, and the world went white. Not metaphorically. Not the way people describe a bright explosion. White. The kind of white that exists before color was invented. Naruto felt the Kyuubi's chakra surge, not the controlled burn he'd been learning to work with, not the careful borrowing he'd managed against Haku or Pain or any of the others, but something absolute. A detonation from the inside. The fox wasn't angry. It wasn't afraid. It was responding, the way a compass needle responds to a magnetic field, snapping towards something it recognized before the conscious mind understood why. The Chidori went through the Rasengan. Naruto felt it in his shoulder, the white-hot entry of Sasuke's hand, the lightning stuttering through his muscle and bone, and he grabbed Sasuke's wrist with his free hand even as he was going down, because he wasn't letting go, he was never letting go, that was the whole point, that had always been the whole point. Sasuke caught him. For just a second. Naruto saw his face, really saw it, the way you see someone when the performance falls, and Sasuke looked like someone drowning in a well he'd dug himself, looking up at the light and deciding the light was the problem. Then Sasuke let go. And Naruto fell. He fell into the river and kept falling, and the Kyuubi's chakra exploded outward in a column of red-orange fire that scorched the surface of the water and boiled the spray and rose toward the leaden sky like something being born from something dying. Naruto felt it happening, felt the boundaries of himself going soft and strange, the lines between his chakra and the fox's becoming less like a wall and more like a watercolor, colors bleeding into each other. He tried to form the fox's face. He'd done it before. He knew the shape of that anger, that heat, that immense compressed hatred that had been redirected and redirected until it was almost something else. He reached for it, and touched something else. Something that wasn't the fox. Something that had been waiting so long it had forgotten what waiting felt like. The fissure opened the way cracks appear in old stone, not dramatically, not with announcement, but with the quiet inevitability of pressure finding its path. It split the chakra realm down the middle, and from the other side came a cold blue light that had absolutely no business being anywhere near the red-orange inferno of the Kyuubi's chakra. The two energies hit each other. And then they stopped fighting. Above the valley, the sky turned a color that had no name. Sasuke stood at the edge of the waterfall's mist and watched the light from below paint shadows backward across the stone faces of the Hokage. He watched the river boil and the sky break and the column of energy rise and shift from red to something between violet and silver and a blue so deep it was almost black. He watched it for a long time, long enough to understand that whatever was happening down there, it was not something he had caused. Not entirely. His hand was shaking. He looked at it with something close to disgust, curled the fingers into a fist, and turned away. He was halfway up the cliff when the light went out. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sasuke had ever heard. The chakra void was not a place in any geographical sense. It had no floor, no ceiling, no walls you could touch. It was the space between the space, the gap inside the seal where the Kyuubi's presence had always bled through in Naruto's dreams as a cage in a red glow and the sound of something enormous breathing. He'd been here before. He knew this place. Except the cage was gone. The bars, those massive red-rusted bars that had always loomed at the edge of his dreamscape like the teeth of some impossible prison, were bent outward, pried apart from the inside and the outside simultaneously, as if two immense forces had agreed that this particular structure had outlived its purpose. Naruto stood in the middle of it and looked at where the cage used to be. "Ha," he said. "Eloquent," said a voice. It wasn't the Kyuubi's voice. He knew the Kyuubi's voice, he'd been hearing it his whole life, whether he recognized it or not, low and resonant and furious, the voice of something that had been wronged so long ago that the wronging had become a permanent weather system. This was different. Deeper, maybe. Or maybe depth wasn't the right word. Maybe the right word was older. This was a voice that had been speaking before there were ears to hear it. He turned around. The wolf was the size of a mountain. Except it wasn't, because it was also standing right in front of him, close enough to touch, which meant that size was simply not a concept that applied to it the way it applied to everything else Naruto had encountered. Its fur was the color of deep water where the light runs out, not black, not blue, but the color that exists between them when the sun is gone and the ocean is just the ocean. Its eyes were silver white and burning, and they held the kind of intelligence that doesn't need to perform itself, that simply exists the way gravity exists, requiring no demonstration. Beside it, or maybe within it, or maybe the two things were happening at once, was Kurama. The fox looked different. That was the first thing Naruto noticed. Still enormous, still nine-tailed, still carrying that specific brand of arrogant pride that Naruto had come to recognize as the Kyuubi's particular personality. But the red of his chakra had changed. It was threaded through with silver blue now, the way iron or looks when it's been through a forge, refined, intensified, the impurities burned away to leave something denser and more elemental. Kurama looked at Naruto with an expression Naruto had never seen on the fox's face before. He looked relieved. "What," Naruto said, "is happening?" "An excellent question," said the wolf. "One I have been waiting to answer for approximately 40,000 years. You've been waiting 40,000 years to explain something to me specifically?" "Not you specifically. A vessel like you. One with enough chakra, enough will, and enough fundamental stubbornness to survive the fissure." The wolf tilted its massive head, and somehow the movement was conversational rather than threatening. "Though I confess your particular brand of stubbornness is extraordinary even by the standards I was hoping for." Naruto looked at Kurama. "You could have warned me about this." "I didn't know," Kurama said, and the admission clearly cost him something. The fox met his gaze straight on and didn't look away from it, which was new. "I felt him when our chakra reached its limit. I felt the fissure before I knew what it was." And then, a pause. "And then I remembered." "Remembered what?" "That I knew him." Kurama said it simply, the way you say something that's been true for so long it doesn't feel like a revelation anymore. "Before the sage. Before the tailed beasts were separated and named and sealed and weaponized. Before any of that. There was him. Naruto turned back to the wolf. So you're, Fenrakan, the wolf said. Though the name has been used so rarely in the last several thousand years that I have almost stopped thinking of it as mine. Fenrakan. Naruto turned the name over. It felt strange in his mouth, like a word from a language he should know but had never been taught. And you're inside me now. We are inside you now, Fenrakan said. Myself and your old tenant. Though inside may be the wrong framing. We are, all three of us, a single thing that has not yet finished deciding what shape it takes. I get a vote on that, right? The wolf looked at him for a long moment, and something moved behind those silver-white eyes that might, in a human face, have been the beginning of a smile. That, Fenrakan said, is exactly why I chose you. Naruto sat down in the middle of the void, or the approximate location of the void that had until recently contained the Kyuubi's cage, and looked up at a wolf god and a reformed demon fox and thought about how, even by his standards, this was a genuinely unusual Tuesday. All right, he said. Start from the beginning. Kurama made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. The beginning, Fenrakan said, is a long way back. I've got time, Naruto said. Sasuke already left, and I can't exactly go anywhere at the moment. He caught the way the two ancient beings exchanged a look over his head, not a worried look, exactly, but the look of two people who have just agreed that the person they've been waiting for is stranger than they anticipated, and stranger in a better way than they had dared hope. Before the tailed beasts existed as separate entities, Fenrakan began, and his voice settled into the void like stones settling into deep water. Before the chakra of the world was divided and distributed and tamed into the forms you know, there was the primordial essence. Not just chakra. Not just spiritual energy. The raw material of everything that would become those things. And within that essence lived the celestial beasts, not 9 of them, not 10, but a number that doesn't translate well into your counting systems. More than 9, Naruto said. Vastly more. But most of us chose to return to the essence rather than remain as separate beings when the world began to solidify. The ones who stayed, who chose to maintain individual form, became what the Sage of Six Paths eventually worked with. The Mother Beast and her children. But before the Sage, before the Uchiha and Senju lineages, before any of the clans, there was the age of the celestial beasts. And I was the last of the primordial ones. Why didn't you go back? To the essence thing? Because I was not finished, Fenrakan said, and for the first time something sharp and old moved through his voice. Because I could see what was coming. The division of the chakra, the wars, the endless cycle of beasts being captured and weaponized and turned into instruments of political terror. I could see it all, the way you can see a storm coming from very far away. And I chose to stay and wait for a moment when I could do something about it. And that moment is now. That moment, Fenrakan said, is you. Naruto was quiet for a while. Around him the void did what voids do, it waited. Okay, he said finally. So what does that actually mean? For me. Concretely. Kurama leaned down, and for the first time in Naruto's life the nine-tailed fox brought its enormous face level with his without it feeling like a threat. It means the seal that kept us separate no longer exists. It means my chakra and Fenrakan's essence and your own are one thing now. It means you are not a Jinchuriki anymore. What am I, then? Something new, Kurama said. Something that hasn't existed since the world was young. The celestial beast lord, Fenrakan said. A vessel, a partner, a convergence. Not a container. Not a weapon. A being that holds the old power and the new will in the same body and calls it home. Naruto looked down at his hands. He could feel it, now that he was looking for it, now that the immediate chaos of the transformation had settled into something more navigable. He could feel Kurama the way he'd always felt him, but where the fox's chakra had always arrived like a flood, uncontrolled, burning, demanding, it now arrived like a tide. Rhythmic. His. And beneath it, or maybe woven through it, something vast and cool and silver blue that he understood without understanding, the way you understand the sea without knowing its depth. Can I still be me? He asked. Is there room for that? The wolf looked at him for a very long moment. Naruto, Fenrakan said, and the sound of his name in that ancient voice was something he would never entirely get used to. You are the reason there is room for anything. He came back to consciousness face down in the shallows of the river. The rain had started. Not dramatically, just the quiet gray rain that the land of fire does in autumn, the kind that doesn't announce itself, just settles in like a houseguest who knows you can't make them leave. The water was cold and the stone beneath him was hard and his shoulder hurt in a way that told him Sasuke's Chidori had done real work before the transformation took everything else over. He pushed himself up. The shoulder healed between one breath and the next. Not slowly, not over minutes, in a single exhale, the torn muscle and the lightning-burned tissue and the bruising simply stopped existing. He felt the chakra do it the way he'd feel a door close in another room, aware of the mechanism, unbothered by the distance. He sat in the shallows and looked at his hands. They were his hands. Same calluses, same ink stain on the left index finger from a mission report he'd been filling out 3 days ago, same scar on the right knuckle from a sparring session with Lee that had gone comically wrong. His hands. But the chakra running through them was different, he could see it now, a faint trace of silver blue at the edges of his skin, barely visible, like the glow of something deep water beneath ice. He stood up. The river didn't respond. The valley didn't shift. The stone faces of the first and second Hokage continued to stare at each other across the waterfall with the same impassive dignity they'd maintained for generations. Nothing in the world had changed except everything. Kurama, he said. Present, said a voice in his chest. Not quite his own voice. Not quite the voice from a cage. Something in between, settled and warm and carrying the particular dry tone that Naruto was beginning to recognize as the fox's version of affection. Fenrakan. Here, said something older, quieter, like the space between words rather than the words themselves. Naruto exhaled. Okay, he said. Let's go home. He didn't run. He'd always run, from the moment he could walk he'd been running, toward people, away from pain, toward confrontation, up walls and across rooftops and through forest and water. Running had always felt like the only pace his body agreed with. But now he walked out of the shallows and up the bank and through the tree line at a pace that had nothing to do with urgency and everything to do with intention. Each step deliberate. Each step certain. The chakra moved with him like a second skin he'd always had and was only now wearing correctly. He'd made it maybe half a kilometer into the forest when he felt them, 2 chakra signatures, low and careful and trying very hard not to be sensed, because they were professionals and professionals don't announce themselves. He stopped walking. I know you're there, he said, to the trees in general. Come out. A pause. Then 2 ANBU dropped from the canopy, the masks blank and identical the way ANBU masks always were, the body language careful in that particular way that meant they were scared but wouldn't say so. Uzumaki Naruto, the closer one said. We were sent to locate you. After the beat. After the event at the valley. The event, Naruto repeated. The energy discharge. Yes. Konoha's sensors detected something significant. Naruto looked at them. Both ANBU were skilled, he could feel their chakra, compact and controlled, the signature of people who had trained for years to be calm in impossible situations. They were currently not calm. Their chakra was doing that thing where it tried to be still and failed at the edges. Tell Hokage Tsunade I'm on my way, he said. Tell her I'm fine. Tell her I'll explain everything when I get there. We were instructed to escort, I know what you were instructed to do. He said it gently, without heat, because they were just doing their jobs and their jobs were currently more complicated than they'd expected. I'm not asking you to disobey orders. I'm asking you to trust me to show up. The closer ANBU was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, are you alright? Your chakra signature is different, Naruto said. Very different. Yeah. He started walking again. That's an understatement. Tell Tsunade I'm coming. He left them behind, and he didn't look back, and they didn't follow, and something about all of that felt exactly right. He'd always loved Konoha at night. Daytime Konoha was a village going about its business, merchants and civilians and genin running errands and chunin on patrol, and the whole perpetual motion machine of a hidden village that had been running so long its own momentum had become its primary fuel. But nighttime Konoha was something else. The lanterns on the streets, the smell of late ramen from Ichiraku's, the sound of the Hokage rock being rained on from a distance, it was the version of home that he'd been reaching for every time he came back from anywhere, the version that existed in the back of his mind as a fixed point when everything else was moving. He came through the main gate at 3 a.m. The gate guards were Kotetsu and Izumo, who'd been working this gate since before Naruto could grow a complete sentence, and they knew him the way you know the furniture of your own house. Kotetsu looked up from his paperwork and said, Naruto, in the flat tone of a man who has processed many unusual returns at many unusual hours. Then he looked at Naruto properly and the flat tone evaporated. Naruto, he said again, differently. Hey, Kotetsu, Naruto said. Your eyes. Naruto had discovered the eye thing about 40 minutes outside the village, when he'd caught his reflection in a puddle on the road. His eyes were still blue, Uzumaki blue, the particular clear blue that had always been his most recognizable feature, but there was a ring of silver around the iris now, fine and luminous, the kind of detail that wouldn't register in bad light but in direct lamplight was impossible to miss. It's a long story, Naruto said. Is Tsunade in the tower? She's been in the tower since the sensors went off. Izumo had found his professional voice. She's waiting for you. Good. Naruto walked through the gate. Konoha at 3 a.m. was mostly empty, which he was grateful for. The few people who saw him, late shift chunin, a merchant closing up shop, a couple of ninja heading back from a mission, all stopped and looked, the way you stop and look when something triggers a recognition below the conscious level, when the body understands a change before the mind does. Nobody said anything. Nobody ran. They just watched him pass. They can feel it, Kurama said, inside that new settled space in his chest. What are they feeling? You. The way they've always felt you. Except now there's no ceiling on it. The Hokage tower was lit like daylight at 3 a.m, which told him that whatever Tsunade had been told, it had been enough to get everyone involved. He could feel the chakra signatures before he got to the door, Tsunade's massive, controlled medical chakra, Shizen's quieter signature beside her, 2 ANBU inside the room and 2 more in the corridor, and Kakashi. His sensei was leaning against the wall outside the tower's second floor, the orange book nowhere in evidence, which Naruto had learned was the tell. Kakashi without his book was Kakashi actually paying attention. He was looking at the street, but the angle of his head shifted the moment Naruto cleared the gate, which meant he'd been tracking the approach by chakra sense for the last several minutes. Naruto climbed the stairs. Kakashi didn't say anything until Naruto was level with him in the corridor, and then he straightened up from the wall and looked at his student with the single eye that saw too much and kept most of what it saw to itself. You're alive, Kakashi said. Yep. Sasuke. Alive. Left. Heading for Orochimaru. Naruto paused. I couldn't stop him. Kakashi absorbed this. The eye moved to Naruto's face, then to the faint silver-blue trace at his hands, then back to his face. What happened? At the valley? Our jutsu hit. The Kyuubi surged. Something cracked open that apparently had been waiting to crack open for a very long time. Naruto looked at his hands, then back at his sensei. You'll get the full version inside. But the short version is, I'm fine. More than fine. I'm different, and I need Tsunade to hear it from me before she hears a garbled version from anyone else. Kakashi was quiet for a moment. Then, your chakra signature. I know. Kakashi stopped. His eye was doing the thing where it held too many emotions at once and processed them in silence because that was Kakashi's entire methodology for emotional experience. When the sensors went off, the reading they got, Naruto, they thought a tailed beast had been released directly into the valley. The reading was, more than that, Naruto said. Considerably more than that. Another pause. Are you still you? It was such a direct question, delivered in such a quiet voice, that it landed somewhere below Naruto's sternum and stayed there. He looked at his sensei, at the careful gray eye, the posture that looked casual and was actually watchful, the man who had taught him to be exactly as reckless as the mission required and not a millimeter more, and felt something unlock in his chest. Yeah, he said. Still me. More me, maybe. It's hard to explain. Kakashi looked at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, I'll hear the explanation inside. He pushed off the wall and reached out and gripped Naruto's shoulder, the good shoulder, not the one that Sasuke's Chidori had gone through, though it didn't matter anymore since the healing had been instantaneous, and the grip was brief and firm and said everything that Kakashi's words didn't, which was the only way Kakashi knew how to say things that mattered. Then he let go, and they went inside. Tsunade's office at 3 in the morning looked like the aftermath of an argument with an intelligence briefing. Reports spread across every available surface, 2 of her advisors standing in the corners trying to make themselves useful, Shizune beside her desk with a clipboard and the expression of a woman maintaining professional composure through sheer force of will. Tsunade herself was behind her desk, and she looked up when the door opened with the expression of someone who has been managing fear by converting it to anger for several hours. She looked at Naruto. The anger didn't go anywhere, but something shifted underneath it. Sit down, she said. I'll stand, he said. Not to be difficult. Just because it was true. Her eyes moved across his face, his hands, the trace of silver blue light at the edges of him, and he watched her process what she was seeing with the focused intensity of a medical ninja and the layered history of a woman who'd known his father and watched his mother seal a demon into an infant and spent the last several years betting against every expectation the village had placed on him. Tell me, she said. So he did. He told it plainly, the way you tell someone something true, the Chidori and the Rasengan, the white void, the fissure, Kurama's chakra finding something it recognized across 40,000 years of silence. He told it without drama, without apology, without softening it for the room. He told them about Fenrakan, the name and the age and the nature of what the wolf was and what it had been waiting for. He told them about the void and the conversation and the 3-in-1 nature of what he'd become. He talked for 20 minutes and the office was absolutely silent the entire time. When he finished, Tsunade leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Fenrakan, she said. You know the name? He asked. I've seen it once. In a scroll in the restricted archive that I was specifically told as a child never to open. She brought her gaze back down from the ceiling. My grandfather mentioned it. Said it was a name from before the sage. Before the tailed beasts. Before everything. She paused. He said it like a myth. Not a myth, Naruto said. No, Tsunade agreed. Apparently not. One of the advisors, Hamura, old and calculating and currently doing very poor work of hiding how alarmed he was, cleared his throat. Hokage-sama, the implications of this are considerable, Tsunade said. I'm aware. Her eyes didn't leave Naruto. Are you in control? Completely. No, I mean of all of it. The fox, the wolf, the combined chakra, I'm not fighting them, Naruto said. That's the difference. I'm not holding anything back anymore. We're all going the same direction. He paused. It's the first time in my whole life my chakra hasn't felt like something I was arguing with. Tsunade was quiet for a while. Demonstrate, she said. He blinked. Right now. Right now. Don't break anything in my office. Naruto held out his right hand, palm up, and let a fraction of the combined chakra rise to the surface. Just a fraction, the way you open a window an inch to let in a breeze rather than a gale. The silver blue and red-orange twined in his palm, spinning around each other without conflict, without violence, generating a soft light that was warm and cold at once, throwing shifting shadows across Tsunade's desk and the reports and the carefully maintained faces of everyone in the room. He closed his hand and it went out. The silence lasted several seconds. "All right," Tsunade said, and her voice was steady, and only someone who had known her for years would have caught the fraction of something else in it. "Shizune. Get Jiraiya on a summons line. He needs to hear this before anyone else does." She turned to Hamura and Koharu, the advisors, with a look that ended arguments before they started. "What happens in this room tonight does not leave this room through any channel you control. Clear?" Hamura drew himself up. "Hokage-sama, the other nations will have detected the energy discharge from the valley. We will have inquiries, and I'll handle the inquiries," Tsunade said. "What I need from you, right now, tonight, is silence. Can you manage that?" A pause. Then, "Yes, Hokage-sama." Tsunade stood up, which she did rarely and only when she was done being diplomatic. She walked around her desk and stopped in front of Naruto, and she was shorter than him now. He'd shot up 2 inches since he'd last really clocked the comparison, but somehow that had never made her less imposing, the way a mountain is never less imposing for being photographed close up. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she put one hand on the top of his head, the gesture quick and rough and entirely uncharacteristic of her public self, the gesture of someone who'd been afraid and was managing the aftermath of that fear. "You absolute idiot," she said quietly. "I didn't do it on purpose." "You never do anything on purpose and somehow things keep happening to you that have never happened to anyone ever." She stepped back. "I want a full medical assessment tomorrow morning. I want to know what the transformation has done to your physical parameters. I want, Tsunade-sama." He said it quietly, and the quiet of it stopped her. "I'm fine. Really. This is the best I've ever felt." She looked at him. And whatever she found when she looked, whatever the assessment was, medical and personal and everything in between, she nodded, once. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "Don't be late." He smiled. "When have I ever been late?" "Always," she said. "You're always late." He was already walking toward the door when she spoke again. "Naruto." He stopped, hand on the doorframe. "Whatever you are now," Tsunade said, "you're still mine to protect. Villages. Whatever the other nations decide to think about it." A pause. "Don't make that difficult." He looked back over his shoulder at her, at the woman who had come back to the village because he'd asked her to, who had put her title and her safety and her reputation in the center of every decision that involved him, who had never once looked at him the way the rest of the world did. "I won't," he said. He walked out into the corridor, into the rain-soft night, into the village that was his and the life that was his and the self that was entirely, completely, unreservedly his, just more of it now, just larger, just truer. Above him, somewhere in the clouds that had rolled in from the east, a single blue-silver light flickered once. No one else saw it. Naruto saw it. He grinned, stuffed his hands in his pockets, and walked home through the rain. Chapter 2, The Weight of Stars. The medical exam took 4 hours. Tsunade ran it herself, which was the first sign that she was taking this seriously in a way that went beyond her professional obligation to the village. She had Shizune assisting, 2 other medical nin on standby, and a set of diagnostic seals that Naruto had never seen before, old ones, pulled from a storage scroll that smelled like it hadn't been opened since the second Hokage's era. She pressed them against his chest, his spine, his temples, his palms, and each one lit up differently from how it was supposed to. "Your chakra coils are," Shizune started, reading a diagnostic slip. "Different," Naruto offered. "I was going to say restructured." She held the slip closer. "The network is the same, the pathways are the same, but the coils themselves have expanded. Not damaged. Expanded. Like someone installed a larger tank in the same chassis. Larger by how much? Tsunade asked, not looking up from the seal she was pressing to his spine. Shizun did a calculation on the slip. Looked at it again. Did it again. By a factor of, she stopped. That can't be right. How much? Tsunade said. The reading is saying his coil capacity is somewhere between 40 and 60 times the previous output. The room was quiet. His previous output, Tsunade said carefully, was already above Kage level. Yes, Shizun said. That's why I checked it twice. Naruto sat on the examination table and swung his feet because the table was the exact right height for foot swinging, and it was either that or acknowledge the way both women were now looking at him like he'd become a physics problem. Can we talk about the actual body stuff? He said. Like, the healing thing. Because I want to know if that's passive regeneration, Tsunade said, and she moved to his shoulder where the Chidori wound had been and pressed her fingers against the skin with the careful attention of someone looking for evidence. There was none. Completely seamless. No scar tissue. No chakra disruption to the local pathways. The healing was, she paused. Naruto, what did it feel like when it happened? Like breathing out, he said. Just, easy. She took her hand away from his shoulder and stood straight and looked at him with the expression she used when she was being a Hokage rather than a person, the one that assembled information and refused to react to it until it was fully processed. Your vital signs are normal, she said finally. Blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, all normal. The chakra readings are, not normal, but stable. Whatever happened at the valley, your body has integrated it. She picked up a pen and signed off on the clipboard Shizun was holding. You're cleared. That's it? What else do you want me to say? She met his eyes. I can't give you a medical diagnosis for becoming something that doesn't have a medical precedent. I can tell you that you're physically healthy, your mind is intact, and your chakra is doing things I've never seen, but nothing that suggests immediate danger. He hopped off the table. Good enough for me. Naruto. He stopped at the door. Tsunade was looking at the diagnostic slips, not at him. There's one more thing. The silver-blue energy, Fenrakan's presence. It shows up distinctly from the Kyuubi's chakra on the seals. They're separate signatures, but they're cooperating. Actively cooperating, at the cellular level, in your chakra coils. She looked up. I've never seen two distinct chakra natures integrate like that without destroying the host. They're not fighting each other, Naruto said. I told you. I know what you told me, Tsunade said. I just needed to see it confirmed before I could believe it. He left her there with the diagnostic slips and the expression of a woman processing an entirely new category of problem, and walked out into the late morning sunlight. The village had opinions. This was not surprising. Konoha had always had opinions about Naruto. He'd grown up inside the weight of those opinions the way you grow up inside weather, so accustomed to it that you stopped registering the specific shape of each cloud. But the opinions in the market that morning were different from the ones he remembered from childhood, and different again from the grudging respect he'd started earning over the past couple of years. These opinions were quieter. More careful. People looked at him differently when he walked through the market to Ichiraku's. Not with fear, exactly. Not with the old cold hostility that had been the village's default setting for most of his childhood. It was something adjacent to awe, which he found significantly more uncomfortable. He'd never needed anyone to be awed by him. He'd spent too many years wanting them to simply see him for the awe to feel good now that it was arriving. Tucci spotted him from behind the counter and waved with the cheerful specificity of a man who has made his peace with extraordinary circumstances, because when your most regular customer is the son of the fourth Hokage and the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails and now apparently something else again, you develop a certain philosophical flexibility about the concept of normal. The usual? Tucci asked. For bowls, Naruto said, dropping onto a stool. Maybe 5. Hungry? The transformation apparently uses a lot of calories. He had no idea if that was true, but it felt true. Also, I haven't eaten since before the valley. I am materialized from the back with the efficiency of someone who had been feeding Naruto since he was 7 and had developed a sixth sense for when he was about to order unreasonable quantities of ramen. She set broth on the stove without being asked and looked at him with bright, direct eyes. We heard about the valley, she said. Are you alright? Yeah, he said. I'm good. He paused. Really good. She looked at his eyes, at the silver ring around the blue iris, for a moment without making a thing of it, the way people who genuinely know you look at something new about you. Then she nodded and went back to preparing the broth. He was halfway through his second bowl when Sakura sat down beside him. She didn't say anything immediately. She sat down and looked at the menu board the way people look at menu boards when they're organizing what they actually want to say, buying themselves the moment of apparent normalcy before the actual conversation. Sasuke's gone, she said. Yeah. You went after him. You tried. Yeah. She was quiet. He could feel the weight of what was underneath the quiet, not directed at him, or not entirely, but the particular weight of a grief that didn't have a target and was therefore heavier for it. He knew that weight. He'd been carrying a version of it for years in a different shape. Are you okay? He asked. She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that keeps something else from happening. I should be asking you that. I heard Shizun telling someone you were in with Tsunade for 4 hours. Routine, he said. She turned to look at him, really look, the way Sakura looked at things when she was being a medicnine and not just a person, and her green eyes went steady and focused and found the silver in his irises and the faint trace of silver blue at his hands, and she did the medicnine thing where she catalogued it without reacting to it yet. Naruto, she said. What happened to you? He told her. Shorter version than he'd given Tsunade, not because he was hiding anything from her, but because the full version felt like something for quiet moments with people who had hours to sit with it, and Sakura had the look of someone who was already holding a lot. He gave her the shape of it, the key facts, the transformation and Fenrakan and the 3-in-1 nature of the new configuration. She listened without interrupting. That was new. Sakura had always been an interrupter, quick mind, faster mouth, opinions arriving before she'd finished processing the information. But she listened to this straight through, and when he finished she was quiet for a long moment. The Kyuubi's chakra fused with an ancient wolf god, she said. With me in the middle, yeah. And now you have the combined power of both. Essentially. And you're fine. I keep saying that. She was quiet again. Then, very quietly, so that only he could hear, he was going to kill you. At the valley. He made that choice. I know. And you're not angry. He considered this seriously, because Sakura was someone who deserved serious consideration. He looked at his second empty bowl and thought about Sasuke on that cliff, that expression, the compressed spring of someone who had decided that the way out of the well was to destroy the walls. Was he angry? He tested the feeling the way you test a bruise, applying pressure to find the edges. I'm sad, he said. I'm not angry. I've never really been angry at Sasuke. A pause. Angry for him, maybe. But not at him. Sakura absorbed this. Then she reached out and touched his hand, briefly, the way you confirm that something real is present. Bring him back, she said. I will, he said. Tucci set bowl number 3 in front of him and Sakura ordered tea, and neither of them said anything else for a while, and the morning moved around them the way mornings do, unhurried and indifferent and occasionally very kind. Jiraiya arrived at sunset. He came in through the Hokage Tower's window, which was either a habit or an affectation, Naruto had never figured out which, and he landed in Tsunade's office with the specific energy of a man who had run 3 days of travel into 2 and was doing a reasonable impression of not being winded. He was bigger than Naruto remembered, or maybe that was just how he always felt when you'd been away from him, a large loud presence that filled rooms differently from smaller people. He looked at Naruto, who was sitting in the chair across from Tsunade's desk where he'd been for the past hour going over the events at the valley in a more structured way, and the look on Jiraiya's face went through 3 distinct phases in about 2 seconds. The first phase was recognition. The second phase was something that might have been wonder. The third phase was Jiraiya, which meant it got covered immediately by a practiced casualness that didn't fool anyone. "So," Jiraiya said, dropping into the other chair. "So," Naruto said. "Fenrakan. You know the name too?" "I know the name from a prophecy text so old the scroll it's written on turns to dust if you touch it wrong." Jiraiya looked at him directly, the way he only looked at things he was fully serious about. "There are 2 lines in the text that survive. The rest is gone." But the 2 lines say, roughly translated from a script that predates every living language, "When the divided whole remembers itself, the Lord of the celestial beasts walks again." The office was quiet. "The divided whole," Tsunade said. "The tailed beasts," Jiraiya said. "All of them, or rather what they came from. Before the sage split the mother beast's chakra. Before any of the separations." He ran a hand through his white hair. "The wolf wasn't sealed because he was dangerous. He was sealed because he was whole. Because he was the last thing that remembered what the chakra was supposed to be before humans started using it to kill each other at scale." Naruto thought about Fenrakan's words in the void, "I chose to stay because I could see what was coming." "He knew," Naruto said. "He told me. He saw the whole cycle before it happened. The wars, the Jinchuriki, the weapons. And he waited," Jiraiya said. 40,000 years. Jiraiya looked at him for a long moment. "That kind of patience is either wisdom or obsession." "Bit of both," said Fenrakan's voice, which chose this particular moment to vibrate through Naruto's chest and into the air of the office. Jiraiya went very still. It was the first time Naruto had seen Jiraiya go completely still. Not still the way skilled shinobi went still before action. Still the way a person goes still when their world has just been recalibrated. "Was that," Jiraiya started. "Fenrakan," Naruto said. "He doesn't talk much externally. That's the first time he's spoken out loud. I think he wanted you specifically to hear it." "Your student was worth the wait," said Fenrakan, and the silver-blue resonance of it moved through the air of the office like a sound felt in the bones rather than heard in the ears. Jiraiya exhaled slowly. 40,000 years, he murmured. "And he's complimenting my teaching." "Don't let it go to your head," Naruto said. "Too late." But Jiraiya's eyes were bright, and the energy he carried had shifted, focused, the way it focused when he moved from performance to purpose. "Naruto. What do you actually feel like?" "I keep telling people, not the report. Not the Tsunade medical assessment version. What does it actually feel like?" Naruto thought about it honestly. "Like every time before I had to hold myself back. Hold the chakra back, hold the fox back, hold the transformation back because if I went too far too fast everything would fall apart. That's gone." He turned his hands over in his lap. "The ceiling is just, gone. And it doesn't feel like falling. It feels like the ceiling was the cage, and the cage is what was making everything hard." Jiraiya looked at him for a long time, and the look had that specific quality of a man who has been half right about something important and is now calibrating to the full truth. "The prophecy," Jiraiya said quietly, mostly to himself. "The child of prophecy who would change the world. I always assumed it meant someone who would change it through action. Through battles won and lost, the usual pattern." He paused. "But the scroll says when the divided whole remembers itself. Not when the child wins. When something remembers." "Fenrakan remembering himself," Tsunade said. "And the fox remembering what it was before it was a weapon," Naruto added. "And me remembering that I'm not," he stopped, finding the words. "That I'm not just a container. That I'm not defined by what's inside me. That we're the same thing. Jiraiya nodded slowly. Then he leaned forward in his chair. There's something you need to know. Something I found in the texts that Tsunade asked me to look for, after she got the summons. He glanced at Tsunade, who gave a minimal nod. The energy discharge from the valley was detectable. Not just to Konoha's sensors. The spike in chakra from a combined celestial-tailed beast emergence would have registered in every major sensor network across the 5 nations. He paused. That means people know something happened. They don't know what, but they know the scale. And? Naruto said. And there are organizations that have been waiting for exactly that kind of signal for a very long time, Jiraiya said. People who knew the prophecy existed. People who prepared for the possibility of the celestial convergence the way military organizations prepare for any contingency they've identified as an existential threat. Who? I'm still pulling threads, Jiraiya said. But I have a name. The Iron Covenant. Tsunade's expression shifted barely. I've heard that name. In ANBU's classified records, Jiraiya confirmed. Funded by interests from at least 3 nations. Ostensibly a chakra research organization. Actually a paramilitary force built around a single doctrine. He looked at Naruto. The containment of beings whose chakra exceeds the threshold the human political order can manage. They want to contain me, Naruto said. They want to eliminate the threat you represent, Jiraiya said. Which in their framework means either controlling you or removing you from the equation. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Then he said, let them try. Not with heat. Not with the bravado of someone performing confidence. With the simple factual tone of a person describing weather, it will rain, or it won't, and either way the farm stands. Jiraiya looked at him and something in the older man's expression settled. That's what I thought you'd say, Jiraiya said. You say it like it's a problem. I say it because I needed to hear it, Jiraiya said. I needed to know you weren't afraid. I'm not afraid of anyone, Naruto said simply. He was on top of the Hokage rock at midnight. This had always been his place, not the apartments he'd lived in, not the ramen stand, not even the training ground where he'd worked himself unconscious more times than he could count. The top of his father's carved face, the highest point in Konoha, wind and sky and the village spread out below him, lights going out one by one as the night deepened. He sat with his legs over the edge and his hands loose in his lap and felt the power move through him the way a river moves through its banks, not straining against them, not flooding, just moving the way it was built to move, in the channel it had carved for itself. You're thinking about the Uchiha, Kurama said. Yeah. He made his choice. Choices can be remade. Naruto looked at the dark tree line to the south, in the general direction of wherever Sasuke was putting distance between himself and home. That's the whole point, isn't it? Every choice is a door. You can go back through it. He tried to kill you. So did you, Naruto said. Repeatedly. A pause. Then Kurama said, with a tone that was the fox's equivalent of clearing his throat, that's a fair point. I know. You're infuriatingly hard to stay angry at. I've been told. Above him, the night sky was doing its ordinary miraculous thing, stars in their ancient formations, clouds moving across them without urgency, the moon 3/4 full and generous with its light. He lay back on the stone and looked up at it. Fenrakan, he said. Yes. The Iron Covenant. What do you know about them? A pause, not the pause of someone thinking, but the pause of someone deciding how much to say. More than Jiraiya's texts contain. Their original doctrine was developed from scripture about my sealing. They believe that beings of primordial chakra cannot coexist with human political order. Can we? That depends entirely on whether human political order deserves to coexist with us. Naruto thought about that. That sounds like the kind of logic that ends badly. It does, Fenrakan agreed. The man leading the covenant, Kazan, is not simply a fanatic. He is a logical man who has drawn a logical conclusion from a set of premises. The problem with his premises is that they treat power as inherently corrupting. And it's not. For most, it is. For you, a long pause. I have been waiting 40,000 years, Naruto. I have watched more vessels than you can imagine come close to what you are. Every single one of them eventually began to use the power for the self, for the dominance of the self over others. Another pause, this one different, careful, honest. You are the first who asked if you still got to vote on your own shape. Naruto was quiet for a long time. No pressure or anything, he said. Fenrakan made a sound that was absolutely, definitively, not a laugh, but in the same general neighborhood as one. He lay on top of his father's face and looked at the stars and let the combined chakra of the fox and the wolf and himself move through him like breathing, like his heartbeat, like every simple involuntary thing that kept him alive and whole, and felt, for the first time in his memory, going back as far as his memory reached, back to the cold apartment and the empty weekends and the faces that looked through him, felt completely, unreservedly settled. The attack came at dawn. He felt it before the alarms went off, a cluster of chakra signatures moving through the forest to the northeast, careful and disciplined and radiating the specific quality of professionals who had done this before. 11 signatures. Trained, controlled, suppressed to almost nothing, which meant elite. Which meant someone had put real resources into this particular morning. He was already dressed and moving before the first alarm sounded. The ANBU were scrambling. He passed 3 of them heading northeast as he moved through the village at a pace that covered ground faster than it should have at what appeared to be an easy jog. He felt the ANBU clocking his speed and letting it go, which was a form of professional adaptation he respected. He cleared the village's northeast perimeter in 4 minutes. The forest was the old-growth kind, massive cedar and pine, the kind that took generations to grow this thick, that had been here since before the village was built around them. The 11 chakra signatures were spread in a pattern he recognized as a reconnaissance and extract formation, 4 on the outer ring, 4 on a tighter inner ring, 3 command level at the center. Whoever had taught them to move like this had taught them well. He walked into the middle of their formation. One of the outer ring operatives landed in front of him with a weapon already drawn, a blade built into a sealing mechanism, the kind of hybrid tool that was custom-made rather than standard issue. The operative's face was covered, armored in dark gray, no identifying marks. The armor itself was unfamiliar, not any Hidden Village's standard kit. "Stop," the operative said. "I did stop," Naruto said. "I'm standing right here." "You are Uzumaki Naruto." "I am." "You will come with us." Naruto looked at the operative with the specific patience of someone who has already run the numbers on the situation and is allowing the other party the dignity of finishing their sentence. "What's the Iron Covenant planning to do with me if I come with you?" A pause. The operative's chakra spiked slightly, surprise, controlled but real. "Our commander will explain. Here's what I'm going to do instead," Naruto said. "I'm going to let you all leave the land of fire. Unharmed. Because you don't know enough about what you're dealing with to make good decisions this morning, and that's not your fault, it's your commander's." He looked out at the trees, at the spots where he could feel the other 10 signatures trying not to be felt. "But I need you to take a message back. You're not in a position." The silver blue and red-orange chakra came up the way sunlight comes up, completely, all at once, a dawn rather than a candle being lit. It didn't explode outward. It didn't threaten. It simply existed, fully, the way Naruto himself existed, without apology or performance. The air in the forest changed temperature. The leaves on the cedars shook without wind. The chakra of all 11 operatives, every one of them, outer ring and inner ring and the 3 command level at the center, went completely still with an involuntary shock response. The operative in front of him took 1 step back. Not because Naruto had moved toward them. Because the distance between them had suddenly felt insufficient, in the way a campfire feels insufficient when you realize you're standing next to a forge. "Message," Naruto said, and his voice was perfectly even. "I know what the Iron Covenant is. I know what Kazan believes. Tell him I'm not hiding. Tell him I'm not going to hide. If he wants to understand what I am, he can come ask. A pause. But if he sends people into my village again, I will not be this patient. He let the chakra settle back down, like a tide going out at a pace that made the going out more impressive than the coming in. Go, he said. They went. All 11, melting back into the trees with the speed of people who had decided that this particular mission had been successful in the category of gathering intelligence and had a complicated relationship with the category of completion. Kakashi landed beside him 30 seconds later, slightly winded, and looked at the direction the operatives had gone. Were those, Iron Covenant, Naruto said. Reconnaissance unit. What did you do? Talked to them. He turned back toward the village. And showed them enough to know that whatever Kazan thinks he's walking into, the real thing is different. Kakashi fell into step beside him. You let them go. They were following orders from someone who gave them bad information, Naruto said. Punishing them for that doesn't accomplish anything useful. Kakashi was quiet for a moment. Then, what does accomplish something useful? Making sure Kazan gets the message directly, Naruto said. Making sure he knows exactly what he's dealing with before he makes a decision that hurts people. And if he makes the decision anyway? Naruto shrugged. Then we deal with that when it comes. Kakashi looked at him sideways, with that evaluating gray eye. You're different, his sensei said. Not a complaint. Not alarm. Just an observation delivered with the careful precision of a man filing it accurately. Getting that a lot, Naruto said. No, I mean from yesterday. From this morning's exam. Kakashi paused. Yesterday you were still finding your footing. The way you walked, the way you talked. Still the same you, but there was something, processing. Settling. He looked ahead into the trees. This morning there's no settling anymore. It's done. Naruto thought about the top of the Hokage rock and the stars and the feeling of the river in its banks. Yeah, he said. I think it is. They walked back into the village together, and the morning sun came up over the eastern wall and painted everything gold, and inside the layered warmth of the combined chakra, Fenrakan was quiet and Kurama was quiet, and all three of them moved together through the brightening day like one thing that had finally learned its own name. Jiraiya was at Ichiraku's when they got there, for bowls already in, a research scroll open on the counter beside him that Tsuchi was politely ignoring. He looked up when Naruto sat down and registered the expression on his face. Something happened, Jiraiya said. Iron Covenant Recon Unit. Northeast Forest. Jiraiya's hand stopped halfway to his bowl. Already. Fast work, Kakashi said, sitting on Naruto's other side. They were already in transit when the valley event happened, Jiraiya said. The signal didn't summon them. It confirmed something they were already positioned for. He set his chopsticks down. Which means Kazan had intelligence about the possibility of a celestial convergence before it happened. Or he had intelligence about me specifically, Naruto said. Both, probably. Jiraiya looked at him steadily. What did you do? Let them leave. Sent a message. Jiraiya processed this. What kind of message? The kind that tells him I'm not going to play the game where I pretend to be less than I am so he feels comfortable, Naruto said. He thinks the risk is something I'm hiding. Something I could hide. I want him to understand that's not what this is. Jiraiya was quiet for a while, staring at the space where his research scroll was spread without quite seeing it. Then, slowly, there's a theory about how to handle threats that see power as an existential problem. And the theory is that trying to appear less threatening never works. It just delays the confrontation while giving your opponent time to prepare. Right, Naruto said. The counter theory is that showing your full hand too early gives your opponent information they can use to build a more effective response. Naruto looked at him. Which theory do you think applies here? Jiraiya looked back. I think when the hand you're showing is what I saw in this village last night, what I felt from outside the gate before I even got inside, I think there is no counterresponse to build. Because you can't build a ceiling over something that doesn't have one. Naruto turned back to his bowl, which had materialized in front of him without being asked, and picked up his chopsticks. Then we're on the same page, he said, and started eating. The morning moved on. The village woke around them in stages, first the merchants, then the civilians, then the younger shinobi heading to morning training. The ramen was hot and the broth was good, and somewhere to the northeast, 11 Iron Covenant operatives were running back to their commander with a message that was going to change the shape of the problem in ways Kazan hadn't anticipated. Naruto ate his ramen and let the combined power of 40,000 years of celestial memory and 9 tails of undivided chakra rest comfortably in his chest like the most natural thing in the world, and thought about Sasuke somewhere in the dark beyond Konoha's walls, and thought about what comes next. He was ready for whatever it was. More than ready. The world hasn't seen anything like you since it was young, Fenrakan said quietly, somewhere under his heartbeat. Naruto finished his bowl and reached for the next one. Good, he said. I've always liked being first. Chapter 3, The Iron Covenant. Kazan read the report twice. He was not a man who needed to read things twice. In 23 years of intelligence work, first for Kyuubi, then for the network of private interests that eventually became the Iron Covenant, he had trained himself to absorb a report completely on the first pass, extracting every relevant detail and filing it in the organized architecture of a mind that had never once allowed itself the luxury of being surprised. He'd read battle reports, assassination logs, the kind of intelligence that had made his field officers lose sleep for weeks, all of it in one pass, calm and complete. He read this one twice. His tent was set up in a cedar forest 40 kilometers from Konoha's eastern border, temporary camp, minimal footprint, 17 people including his core command staff and 6 of his best field operatives. The tent was sparse by design. A folding table, maps, a lantern, a chair. Kazan didn't believe in comfort during an operation. Comfort made the mind soft. He set the report down. Across the table, Elder Muriai waited. She was perhaps the only person in the Iron Covenant who could wait without fidgeting, without performing patience. She simply existed in stillness the way water exists in a glass, completely and without effort. She was 42 and looked older, not from age but from the specific erosion of someone who had been carrying a decision they hadn't fully made for a very long time. 11 operatives, Kazan said. All returned safely, Muriai said. As he indicated they would be. He let them leave. Kazan stood and moved to the map on the table, the detailed topographical survey of Konoha and the surrounding terrain, annotated in his own hand over the past 6 months. He identified them through their chakra suppression. He identified the formation. He named the covenant by name. A pause. He knows what we are. He knows the name. The Toad Sage's intelligence network is thorough. Muriai paused. The operative's account of the chakra display is significant, Kazan said. I was going to say unprecedented. She turned her head slightly, looking at the map from a different angle, the way she looked at problems, from multiple vantages before deciding which one was real. Kazan. The operative said the chakra emergence didn't feel threatening. She said it felt like weather. Like something that simply existed rather than something being aimed at them. Everything about that assessment worries me, Kazan said. Because it means he's in control of it. Because it means he doesn't feel the need to aim it. He turned from the map. A weapon that needs to be aimed can be anticipated. Can be avoided. What she described is not a weapon. He looked at Muriai steadily. It's an environment. Muriai was quiet for a moment. The message he sent. If he wants to understand what I am, he can come ask. What do you make of that? A confidence display, Kazan said. Standard intimidation through implied superiority. He wants us to feel outmatched before engagement. Or, Muriai said carefully, he genuinely means it. Kazan looked at her. He said come ask, she said. Not come and face me. Not come and die. Ask. She placed her hands flat on the map table. I've been sealing chakra anomalies for 19 years, Kazan. I've met 3 Jinchuriki in operational contexts and a dozen chakra-enhanced individuals above the standard threshold. None of them said come ask. They all said come and find out. She paused. The invitation is different. The invitation is a trap, Kazan said, but his tone had a quality in it that was not quite certainty. Not quite. Or it's the truth, she said. And the question we should be asking is whether a being with that level of power that genuinely offers dialogue instead of dominance is more dangerous to our doctrine than one that simply attacks. Kazan turned away from her and stood at the tent's entrance, looking out at the cedar forest in the early morning light. He was a large man, built broad across the shoulders in the way of someone who had used their body as a working tool for decades and maintained it the way a craftsman maintains equipment. The right side of his face was crossed by a scar that went from the jaw to the temple, old, decades old, from an encounter that had formed the architecture of everything he'd built since. He touched it sometimes, unconsciously, when he was thinking through something difficult. He touched it now. Prepare the primary team, he said. Muriai's voice was careful. For what purpose? Not for containment. Not yet. He turned back. I want a demonstration. Something that shows us the actual parameters of what we're dealing with. Something that forces an engagement. He looked at her steadily. I want to see it move. There are civilians in Konoha, Muriai said. I'm aware of that, he said. The strike will be on the outer perimeter. Defense infrastructure, not population. He paused. Muriai. I need data. I can't build a response without data. She looked at him for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then she turned and walked to the tent's map table and began marking positions with the efficient precision of 19 years of practice, and Kazan watched her and told himself that she was simply being thorough, simply working through her doubts the way all excellent operatives work through doubts, by overriding them with the mission, which was what the mission was for. He told himself that. Naruto was in the middle of a training session with Kakashi when he felt them. The training had been Kakashi's idea, not drills, not exercises, but exploration, which was a more honest word for what they were actually doing. Kakashi wanted to understand the new parameters. He'd come to the training ground with the focused curiosity of a man who had spent his entire career cataloging techniques and jutsu and was now faced with something that didn't fit any of his existing categories, and he was handling it the way he handled most things, by observing, testing, asking precise questions, and maintaining the controlled exterior of a person for whom unexpected things were professionally interesting rather than personally alarming. Again, Kakashi said. Naruto held out his hand and let a fraction of the combined chakra form a Rasengan. Except it wasn't a Rasengan anymore, not exactly, the rotation was the same, the core compression the same, but the silver blue of Fenrakan's essence had integrated into the spiral and the thing that spun in his palm was simultaneously denser and steadier than anything he'd managed before, a controlled star rather than an uncontrolled one. Kakashi held up a training post that was roughly the consistency of reinforced concrete. Naruto tapped it. Gently. With a fraction of the output. The post turned to powder. Not broken, powder. Fine gray dust drifting in the morning breeze. Kakashi set down what remained of the post, which was his hand, the post having ceased to exist below his fingers, and looked at it with an expression that went through 3 stages. The first was assessment. The second was something more personal. The third was back to assessment because Kakashi didn't linger in the second stage if he could help it. So, Kakashi said. Yeah, Naruto said. The output-to-effort ratio is ridiculous, Naruto said. I know. I was going to say unprecedented. A pause. But ridiculous works too. He set down the remainder of the post. How's the control at higher outputs? Can you modulate precisely or is it all or nothing? Naruto thought about the Iron Covenant operative in the forest that morning, the way the chakra had come up fully and then receded, like a tide. Precise, he said. Better than before, actually. The more chakra there is, the easier the control. It's like, he searched for the analogy. It's like trying to aim a trickle versus aiming a river. The river has more mass. It goes where you point it. Kakashi nodded slowly, processing this. Then, Kurama. Fenrakan. When you're in high output states, do you, he felt them. Not interrupting Kakashi deliberately, just the sudden shift in his awareness, the way sound sharpens when you hear your own name from across a crowded room. A cluster of chakra signatures moving fast on the northwest perimeter, 6 of them this time, better suppressed than the morning's team, and moving toward the sensor stations rather than into the forest. Target specific. Not reconnaissance. He was already moving. Northwest perimeter, he said. 6 of them. Kakashi was 2 seconds behind him, which by Kakashi's standards was an eternity, and said, "How far?" to Naruto's back. 2 kilometers, Naruto said. Moving fast. Alarms aren't up yet, they will be in 30 seconds. The alarms came up in 28. The Northwest Perimeter Station was a modest installation, a watch post, 2 sensor arrays, a relay transmitter for the village's early warning network. It was staffed by 4 Chunin on rotation and protected by a standard barrier seal that was never intended to hold against anything above Jonin-level assault. Whoever Kazan had sent knew this, because they hit the barrier first. Naruto arrived before it broke. He came through the trees at a pace that wasn't quite running because running implied effort and this didn't require effort, and he hit the perimeter clearing just as the 6 Iron Covenant operatives were bringing a chakra disruption device to bear on the barrier seal. The device looked purpose-built, a containment cylinder similar to the kind used in sealing work, modified with Iron Covenant's signature dark gray engineering aesthetic, currently channeling a focused disruption pulse at the barrier's weakest node. The 4 Chunin at the station were pressed behind a defensive wall with the appropriate combination of professional preparation and genuine fear that the situation warranted. The 6 operatives turned at his arrival and he saw the formation adjust instantly, professionally, the outer 2 moving to flanking positions and the center 4 holding the device and creating a defensive screen. Good training. Fast adaptation. He walked through the defensive screen the way you walk through a doorway. Not a teleport, he didn't move faster than I could track, he didn't use any jutsu, he simply walked through the gap that their formation should have prevented, and the 2 flanking operatives moved to intercept and found that the intercept wasn't landing the way intercept usually landed, the way a hand reaches for a doorknob and finds it 3 inches to the left of where the eye said it was. Naruto's awareness of their movement was so complete that he simply wasn't where they reached. He got to the device, picked it up, and crushed the chakra disruption mechanism in his palm with a sound like crumpling paper. He set the destroyed casing down on the grass. All 6 operatives stopped. "Where's your perimeter officer?" Naruto asked the 4 Chunin behind the wall. The senior Chunin, a woman with precise eyes and a steady voice that was only slightly undermined by her hands, said, "En route. 2 minutes out." "Good." He turned to the 6 Iron Covenant operatives. "You had one job and it was to test my response time. You've got your data." He looked at each of them in turn. "Go back and tell Kazan what you saw." One of the center operatives, taller than the others, carrying themselves with the particular posture of a command-level individual trying not to be identified as one, said, "Lord Kazan's analysis requires, Lord Kazan can come himself," Naruto said. "Or he can keep sending people and keep getting them sent back, and we can all do this indefinitely. But I'll tell you something useful, and I want you to actually deliver this part." He looked at the command-level operative directly. "The message isn't I'm dangerous. Kazan already knows I'm dangerous. The message is this doesn't have to go the way he thinks it goes. He will not negotiate, I'm not asking him to negotiate," Naruto said. "I'm asking him to think." He picked up the crushed device casing and held it out to the command-level operative. "Take this back. As evidence of the engagement. And of restraint. The operative took it. Naruto stepped back and let them leave, and they left, and the senior Chunin came out from behind the defensive wall and looked at him with large eyes. That was the Iron Covenant, the Chunin said. Yeah. They hit our perimeter. They tried to. He looked at the intact barrier seal, which was humming cheerfully and entirely undamaged. How are your people? Anyone hurt? The Chunin blinked. No. No injuries. Good. He glanced back toward the village. The ANBU response team was going to arrive in roughly 40 seconds, moving faster than protocol required because the alarms had given them urgency and urgency made people fast. Full report to Tsunade. Everything you saw and heard. He looked at the Chunin. You did well. He was already on his way back into the trees when the ANBU team broke the tree line behind him. That's twice today, Kurama observed. I know. Kazan is profiling. Building a response. Let him build it, Naruto said. Whatever he constructs, the ceiling of his thinking is the ceiling of his information. And his information is going to keep coming back wrong. You sound very certain. I am certain. A pause. Then, so am I. I'm just noting it. He came out of the forest into the village's morning traffic and slowed to a walk and stuffed his hands in his pockets and walked back toward the center of the village in the direction of Tsunade's tower, where he was going to have to give another report and where Jiraiya was going to have more theory and where the day was going to keep accumulating information that added up to one clear thing: Kazan was not going to stop. That was fine. Neither was Naruto. Tsunade's office at mid-morning had the energy of a command center during an operation, maps on the wall, ANBU representatives present, Jiraiya standing to the side of the room and looking at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had been thinking continuously since breakfast and had arrived at something he wasn't happy about. Naruto gave his report. Tsunade listened. The ANBU representatives listened. Jiraiya listened. 2 engagements in a single morning, Tsunade said. Both tactical. Both against infrastructure, not personnel. He's not trying to harm anyone yet, Naruto said. He's building a model of my response. He wants to know how fast I respond, what I respond with, how much force I use, whether I respond differently to threats against personnel versus infrastructure. Counterintelligence, Jiraiya said. He's running an observation campaign before his actual offensive. How long does he need before he has enough data? Tsunade asked. Jiraiya looked at Naruto. How many engagements before he understands he doesn't have enough data? He'll stop when he understands the data he's gathering doesn't describe a containable problem, Naruto said. He'll stop when the numbers he's building don't produce a viable ceiling. And when he understands there is no viable ceiling? Then he stops planning containment and starts planning something else, Naruto said. He said it plainly, without drama, because it was a plain fact and drama didn't improve plain facts. The room was quiet for a moment. One of the ANBU representatives, a woman in a hawk mask who had been still and silent throughout, said, "We should consider a preemptive strike on his camp position. Jiraiya-sama's network has a probable location." "No," Naruto said. Hawk Mask turned toward him. "The tactical advantage is real," Naruto said. "And irrelevant." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not going to attack 40 kilometers of cedar forest because someone set up camp there and sent recon teams. That's not the kind of thing I do. It's the kind of thing that prevents escalation, it's the kind of thing that confirms his doctrine," Naruto said. Kazan believes that power at this level is automatically a threat to human civilization. If we hit his camp preemptively, we've just proved his thesis. We've shown that the response to opposition is force. He shook his head. "I'm not giving him that." Hawk Mask was quiet. Tsunade was looking at him with an expression that was somewhere between agreement and the specific maternal concern of a woman who recognized stubbornness in action. "There's a middle ground," Jiraiya said slowly. "Between preemptive strike and passive response." "Which is?" Tsunade asked. Intel, Jiraiya said. Not to plan an attack. To understand who Kazan actually is. Why he built the covenant. What specific event or experience formed the doctrine. He looked at Naruto. You told his operatives to tell him to come ask. If you understand what's driving him, you might actually be able to have that conversation. You want to psychoanalyze a warlord, Tsunade said. I want to know if there's a version of this that doesn't end with everyone in the room making decisions we can't take back, Jiraiya said, and the quiet seriousness of it landed in the room the way his serious things always landed, like a large object placed on a table rather than thrown. Tsunade looked at her former teammate for a long moment. Then she turned to the ANBU representatives. Give us the room. They left without argument. Tsunade waited until the door was closed, then moved from behind her desk and sat on the edge of it in the way she sat when she was being a person rather than a Hokage. Here's what I know about Kazan, she said. He was ANBU commander of Kyuubi 12 years ago. He was decorated, effective, apparently loyal. Then something happened on a mission that isn't in any official record. When he came back, he resigned within a week. 3 years later the Iron Covenant appears in intelligence reports. 5 years later it's fully funded and operational. She paused. Nobody knows what happened on that mission. Jiraiya's expression shifted. I might. Both Naruto and Tsunade looked at him. There was an incident, Jiraiya said carefully. I was in the field, compiling research on chakra anomalies, 12 years ago. Kyuubi ANBU intersected with a chakra event in the northern mountains. A being of what the initial reports called primordial essence, the Covenant's terminology for celestial chakra. The event resulted in several casualties. He paused. And in the deaths of multiple civilians caught in the immediate radius. The room was quiet. The primordial being, Naruto said. Was not malicious, Jiraiya said. Based on the event reports I recovered, it was simply, present. Existing. The casualties occurred because the ANBU unit engaged it directly, panicked, and the response chakra overloaded the local area. He met Naruto's eyes. Kazan was the unit commander. He lost 3 of his people and watched civilians die in the crossfire of a battle he started against something he didn't understand. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. He blames the being, Naruto said. He blames the existence of the being in a world with people in it, Jiraiya said. Which is a more sophisticated and more dangerous kind of blame. Now you understand him, Fenrakan said, quietly. Naruto looked at the map on Tsunade's wall. At the markers showing Kazan's probable camp position and the cedar forest and the 40 kilometers of land of fire that separated them. He thought about a man standing in the wreckage of something that had broken wrong and building 12 years of doctrine from a single moment of catastrophic misunderstanding. He's not wrong about everything, Naruto said. Jiraiya blinked. Tsunade's expression shifted. Power without accountability is dangerous, Naruto continued. Power that can't be questioned or challenged or constrained has ended badly every time in history. He's not wrong about the general principle. He looked at Jiraiya. He's just wrong about the application. He thinks the solution is containment or elimination. It's not. What is it? Tsunade asked. Naruto looked at her. Trust, he said. Which is harder than containment and doesn't feel as safe. But it's the only thing that's ever actually worked. Jiraiya looked at him for a long time with the expression that arrived on his face sometimes, rarely, in moments he didn't prepare for, of a man who had been writing a story for years and had just read the line that explained what the story was about. Kid, he said quietly. Don't, Naruto said. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. Naruto stood up. And I've heard it. But I'd rather act like it than hear it. He moved toward the door. I'm going back out. Kazan's going to move again before evening, and I want to be positioned when he does. What makes you certain? Tsunade asked. Because he's a thorough man and the morning gave him 2 data points and thorough men want 3. He opened the door. 3 makes a pattern. And once you've established a pattern, you move to the next phase. He left them there, and walked back out into the village that was his, and the afternoon sun was at a low western angle that painted the street stone gold and the buildings amber, and somewhere in the cedar forest 40 kilometers northeast, a man with a scar and a 12-year doctrine was reading 2 reports and preparing a 3rd operation. Naruto walked through the gold afternoon and thought about what kind of message a 3rd engagement needed to carry, and thought about trust, and thought about how trust was always a more dangerous thing to offer than a weapon because weapons could be taken back and trust, once given, had to be meant. The 3rd engagement came at dusk. It was different from the first 2. Not a recon team. Not an infrastructure strike. A single operative, just one, moving through the forest on the southern approach with the kind of careful directional focus that wasn't reconnaissance and wasn't assault. Moving toward the village center. A messenger. Naruto met them outside the southern gate. The operative was one of the command-level ones from the morning's 2nd team. He recognized the build, the posture, the way they moved. They stopped 20 meters from the gate when they saw him standing there, as if they'd been expected. Which they had. "You knew I was coming," the operative said. "Felt your chakra a kilometer out," Naruto said. "You're not suppressing it." "No." A pause. "I was told not to." "Kazan sent you." "Lord Kazan sends his message." The operative reached into their armor and produced a sealed envelope, actual paper and wax seal, old school, the kind of formal communication that was meant to convey that what was inside was intended to be taken seriously. "He will not send teams again. He will not strike Konoha's infrastructure again." Naruto took the envelope. "For now," the operative added. "For now," Naruto repeated. "He asks," the operative paused, as if rehearsing the exact wording. "He asks that you read the contents before making any further decisions about the path of this conflict." "Tell him I'll read it tonight," Naruto said. "And tell him that the offer still stands. Any time he wants to come ask his questions in person, I'll answer them." The operative looked at him for a moment with something behind the professional mask that might have been personal curiosity, the kind you weren't supposed to display on a mission. "Can I ask you something?" the operative said. "Yeah." "The morning team. The woman who gave her account of the chakra demonstration. She said it didn't feel like a threat." A pause. "She said it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. Like something that had been pressing on her chest her whole life." Just another pause. "She said she didn't know how to explain it." Naruto looked at the operative. "What is it?" the operative asked quietly. "What you're carrying. What you are. Because it doesn't read like any Jinchuriki we have records on, and it doesn't read like any chakra anomaly Lord Kazan has documented." "What is it?" "It's hard to explain in one conversation," Naruto said. "But the short version is that what she felt was the chakra the world was supposed to have before it was divided up and used as a weapon. Before anyone decided it was something you point at people." He paused. "She felt it because it recognized something in her. It recognizes something in everyone. That's what it is." The operative was quiet for a long moment. "Then, I'll deliver your message." "Thank you," Naruto said. They left, moving back into the darkening forest, and Naruto stood at the southern gate with Kazan's sealed letter in his hand and the first stars appearing in the sky above the village. He opened the letter. The handwriting was precise and dense, the handwriting of a man who thought in organized units and communicated the same way. It was short, for what it contained. Uzumaki Naruto. I have read reports of 9-tailed beasts. I have studied every chakra anomaly above standard threshold documented in the past 50 years. I built the Iron Covenant because I watched 3 of my people and 11 civilians die in a single morning because a being that could not be predicted or contained or reasoned with simply existed in the same space as people who were not built to survive it. I do not believe you are malicious. I have never believed that power of this order is malicious in intent. I believe it is malicious in consequence. I believe the history of this world is the history of power outpacing the wisdom to use it, and I believe that every time someone has said trust me, what they meant was trust me until I make a mistake I can't take back. I am watching you. I will always be watching you. The day you make a mistake you can't take back, and you will, because everyone does, I will be the one who acts on it. Not because I want to. Because someone has to be willing to. Kazan Naruto folded the letter carefully. He looked at the stars, which were coming out fully now, the whole weight of them, and he thought about the fissure at the Valley of the End and the void and Fenrakan's 40,000 years of patience and Kurama's evolution from weapon to partner and the silver-blue warmth in his chest that felt like the first real breath the woman operative had described. He thought about Kazan standing in the northern mountains 12 years ago in the wreckage of something that had gone catastrophically wrong, and building his life's work from that wreckage, and being so certain that certainty was enough. He folded the letter again and put it in his pocket. I understand him, he said quietly, to the stars, to the inside of himself where Kurama and Fenrakan were steady and present. Yes, said Fenrakan. That doesn't mean he's right. No, Fenrakan agreed. But it means that when you show him he's wrong, it will need to be done carefully. With specificity. Not with power. A pause. Power he can see. Power he has already accounted for. What he cannot account for is being genuinely understood. Naruto stood at the gate for a while longer, letter in his pocket, village at his back, the night spreading itself overhead with the patient confidence of something that had been doing this for a very long time and saw no reason to stop. Then he turned and walked back inside. The village was lit and alive and entirely itself, and he walked through it the way he'd been walking through it his whole life, with his hands in his pockets and his face to the street and the specific ordinary love of someone who has lived in a place long enough to be built out of it, and thought about trust, and thought about what he was going to do next. He thought about it all the way to Ichiraku's. He was on his third bowl before an answer arrived. Not a plan. Not a strategy. Just the simple certainty that had been the engine of every good thing he'd ever done, the stubborn, unreasonable, unkillable conviction that the right thing was possible, that understanding was possible, that even a man who had built 12 years of doctrine from the worst morning of his life could have a different afternoon. He finished his ramen. Tucci, he said. Yeah. Tucci said. Is the good broth? The one you do for New Year's. Could you make that tomorrow? Tucci blinked. Sure. Any occasion. Naruto thought about it. Someone I want to invite for dinner, he said. Tucci raised an eyebrow. Anyone I know? Not yet, Naruto said. He paid for his bowls, said goodnight, and walked home through a village that didn't know what was coming and didn't need to. That was his job, had always been his job, the thing he'd chosen over and over before he had the words for why, and above him the stars burned in their ancient patterns and Fenrakan was quiet and Kurama was warm and the night was the night, whole and complete and asking nothing of anyone. Chapter 4, The Wolf's Memory. The dream started 3 days after the valley. Not nightmares. Naruto had always been precise about the difference, even as a kid when he didn't have language for it. Nightmares were the ones that left you sweating and reaching for something solid in the dark. These were something else. These were deep, the way the ocean is deep, not threatening but simply larger than you, containing more than you could see from where you were standing. He would close his eyes in his apartment, the modest, slightly too warm apartment above the hardware store that he'd lived in since he was old enough to be left alone in it, and go down fast, past the normal layer of sleep, past the layer where ordinary dreams assembled themselves from the day's leftover noise, all the way down to somewhere that didn't have a name yet. And there he would find Fenrakan's memories. The first one came on the third night and he didn't recognize it for what it was until he was already inside it. He was standing in a landscape that bore no resemblance to anything he knew, not forest, not mountain, not the kind of terrain that the shinobi world had filed under any of its recognizable categories. The sky was wrong. Not wrong bad, just wrong different, 2 moons where one should be, both full, both enormous, casting a double shadow of everything that stood in their light. The ground was something between stone and living matter, breathing slowly, warm underfoot, the way hot springs heat the ground around them, but deeper, more fundamental. And across this landscape moved the celestial beasts. Not 9. Not 10. More. Dozens, maybe more than dozens. He lost count because counting required categories and categories required similarity, and no two of the beings he watched were alike in any way that simple observation could contain. They were all enormous in the way that Fenrakan was enormous, not measurable by comparison to anything else, simply occupying space with the authority of something that had not been built to be a certain size but simply was whatever size it needed to be. They moved without conflict. That was the thing that stayed with him when he surfaced. Not the scale, not the strangeness of the doubled moons, not the warm breathing ground. The fact that they moved among each other without conflict, not peacefully, not carefully, not with the managed neutrality of parties who have agreed to coexist. Without it even being a question. As if the idea of conflict between them was as strange as the idea of the left hand fighting the right. He woke up before dawn with the feeling of it still on his skin and lay in the dark of his apartment and tried to hold the image as long as it lasted. "Fenrakan," he said. "You were there," the wolf said. "Not a question. I was there." He stared at the ceiling. "That's real. That happened. It happened 40,000 years before you were born. But yes. It is real. What ended it?" A long pause. Not hesitation, Fenrakan didn't hesitate. It was the pause of someone choosing the right words from a very large available set. The world solidified. The primordial essence that maintained the original state, that allowed beings of that nature to exist in that way, compressed. As the physical world grew more defined, more structured, the space for what we were shrank. Another pause. We had a choice. Diminish into the structure of the new world, become part of it, take on smaller and more defined forms. Or return to the essence and cease to be individual. Most returned. Most returned. The ones who remained became different. Smaller. Not lesser, but contained. The tailed beasts your era knows are what the celestial beings became when the world they were built for grew too solid for them. Naruto thought about Kurama, about the cage that had held him and the wars that had been fought with him as the weapon and the generations of hatred that had been loaded onto a being that had started as something vast and free and unconflicted. "That's what happened to the fox," Naruto said. "All of them. The compression happened to all of them, yes. But the compression alone would not have created what they became. What created what they became was humans. The decision to treat power as a resource. To extract it, to direct it, to weaponize it." A pause. The first person to look at Kurama and see a weapon instead of a being set in motion everything you know about the tailed beasts. And you watched all of it. I watched all of it. 40,000 years of watching. The watching was not passive, Fenrakan said, and the quality in his voice shifted slightly, not defensiveness, but something more active. I intervened where I could. Not directly, my form was too large for direct action in a solidified world. But I influenced. I moved things toward better outcomes where the angles were right. A pause. The Sage of Six Paths was not the first person to attempt a peaceful relationship with the tailed beasts. He was the first to succeed. He did not succeed entirely by himself. Naruto sat up in bed. "You helped him," he said. "I gave him the right question at the right moment." The wolf's voice carried something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite satisfaction but lived in the neighborhood of both. He was going to try to seal them all at once and apply force to the relationship from the beginning. I showed him a different question. What do the beasts want? And they wanted to be recognized, Naruto said slowly. As themselves. Not as power. As beings. As you recognized me, Fenrakan said. And as you recognized Kurama. Not as tools. Not as threats. As what we are. Naruto was quiet for a long moment, sitting in his dark apartment with the pre-dawn silence of the village around him. "Why didn't you just come through then?" he asked. "When the sage was around?" "Why wait?" "Because the sage was a man of enormous wisdom and enormous limitation," Fenrakan said. He understood that the beasts deserved recognition. He understood that chakra should be a cooperative force. But he still believed, in his deepest assumption, that humans were the purpose and everything else was the context. A pause. "A vessel like that cannot hold what I am without breaking the frame. The convergence requires someone who does not place themselves at the center of the story. And I do that." "You do the opposite," Fenrakan said. "You have spent your entire life trying to make yourself visible not because you believed you were central but because you were afraid you were not there at all." The darkness of the apartment held this for a while. Then Naruto said, "That's very accurate and you could have maybe said it slightly less clearly." "Honesty is more respectful than comfort," Fenrakan said, and this time there was no question about the tone, it was dry and deliberate and amused. "Kurama does that too," Naruto said. "You've been hanging around each other too long." From the other layer of his awareness, warm and present, "We have had 40,000 years of intermittent contact," Kurama said, and there was something in his voice that was genuinely fond, in the way of very old things that have survived long enough to appreciate their own history. "Some qualities transferred." Naruto flopped back onto his pillow and looked at the ceiling. "Okay," he said. "What else do I need to know?" The answer, it turned out, was quite a lot. Over the next 4 days, Fenrakan fed him memory the way a good teacher feeds complex material, not in one overwhelming dump, but in sequences, each piece building on the last, each revelation calibrated to land when he had the context to understand it. He learned about the structure of primordial chakra, not the theoretical chakra as spiritual and physical energy model that the academy taught, but the deeper mechanics, the layer beneath the layer, the substrate that chakra itself ran on. He couldn't have explained it mathematically, it arrived as understanding rather than knowledge, the way you understand that fire is hot not by calculating temperature but by having been near it. He learned about the celestial beast's original relationship with the earth, the reason the wolf's essence felt cool and blue, like deep water, while Kurama's felt hot and red. The world had 2 fundamental energies, and the celestial beasts had been distributed across the full spectrum of them, each carrying a different note of the same chord. The tailed beasts were the remnant of that distribution, compressed and reduced but carrying the original notes distorted, like a song played on an instrument it wasn't written for. He learned about the sealing, not the technical sealing that Konoha's barrier specialists practiced, but the original act, the first sealing, the moment when the progenitor of all sealing jutsu had been developed. Not by the sage. By someone who had come before the sage, whose name had been removed from every record because the act was considered a failure, a tragedy. Someone who had tried to save a celestial being from the compressing world by placing it outside of time itself. "Fenrakan," he said, on the morning of the 4th day, standing on the roof of his apartment building in the early gray before sunrise, the village below him still mostly asleep. "Yes. The original sealing. The one that put you outside time." He paused. "Who did it?" A long pause. "Someone who loved me," Fenrakan said simply. "And who had no other way." The sky was turning from gray to the pink that comes before dawn. Below him the village was making its first sounds, a baker's oven starting somewhere down the street, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of a gate. "Did it work?" Naruto asked. "Being sealed. Did it do what they intended?" "It preserved me," the wolf said. "Whether that is the same as working depends on your definition." Naruto watched the sky lighten. "What was their name?" In the language that existed then, the name translates closest to bearer. "She bore the burden of the act so that I did not have to." A pause, the longest pause Fenrakan had taken, in all the conversations they'd had. She was not a shinobi. She was not a sage. She was simply someone who understood that some things should not be lost from the world, and was willing to do something difficult about it. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "Yes," Fenrakan said. "She sounds like you." Naruto sat with this for a while. Then, all right. Enough history. What do I need to know about Kazan? The shift was deliberate, he'd felt it coming, the right moment to move from the ancient to the immediate, and Fenrakan made the transition without resistance, because this was the point of all of it, the reason the memories were being given now and not later. The Iron Covenant's sealing doctrine was derived from the first sealing, Fenrakan said. The scripture that formed the foundation of my original containment, someone, in the past several decades, discovered a fragment of it. Translated enough to understand the principle. And built a weapons application from it. Naruto went still. The first sealing was a preservation act, he said. Someone who loved you trying to keep you from being lost. Yes. And Kazan's people turned it into a weapon. The principle, stripped of its context, can be weaponized. The mechanics of placing something outside time are the same whether the intention is preservation or imprisonment. It is only the application that differs. Can it work? Naruto asked. On me? A pause that had weight to it, not dramatic weight, but honest weight, the weight of someone declining to be reassuring when reassurance would be dishonest. If it were applied correctly, Fenrakan said, it would be the single most dangerous thing you will have encountered. Because it would not fight you. It would not try to overcome you. It would simply remove you. Place you outside time, outside consequence, outside the ability to act. And Kazan has this. He has a version of it. Derived, imperfect, translated through several generations of incomplete scholarship. A pause. Which makes it less reliable, but not less dangerous. An imperfect version of that doctrine applied incorrectly could do things far worse than the intended effect. Worse how? The intended effect is containment. An imperfect application could collapse local spacetime around the target. Destroy a significant area along with the intended subject. Fenrakan paused. Including anything, or anyone, in the vicinity. Naruto looked at the village below him, the rooftops catching the first pink light of dawn. Then we need to get to Kazan before he uses it, he said. Not to fight him. To make him understand what it actually does. That it's not a safe weapon, that the thing he's built is more dangerous to the people around him than he knows. That is the correct response, Fenrakan said. But he won't listen to me walking up to his camp, Naruto said. He'll interpret it as aggression. As me moving to eliminate the threat. Correct. So I need to find another way in. He ran his hand through his hair, looking at the dawn coming up over the east wall. Someone who already has his ear. Someone who has doubts. He thought about the operative's report from the third engagement, Muriai, the woman who had been marking targets on the map while quietly questioning everything. His second in command. He thought about the way Jiraiya had described her. A chakra sealing specialist. Someone who had been inside the covenant long enough to have doubts and not long enough to have stopped having them. Elder Muriai, he said. She is the door, Fenrakan agreed. But reaching her requires going through Kazan's perimeter, which will trigger exactly the aggressive interpretation you're trying to avoid. Unless, Naruto said slowly, she comes out. He turned the problem over. In his chest, he felt Kurama's attention sharpen. The fox had been listening to the whole conversation in the way Kurama listened to things now, fully present but giving room, the way a very experienced partner gives room in a conversation without disappearing from it. She makes regular supply runs, Kurama said. 3 of the operatives Kazan has sent have shown return signatures that indicate a southeast staging point, roughly 27 kilometers out. Supply depot, probably. Muriai is logistics as much as tactical, she'd be the one to run that line. How do you know that? Naruto asked. I was paying attention when you weren't, Kurama said, and there was the dry tone, the one that now landed with warmth instead of contempt. I have had 35 days of being awake in a cooperative capacity, Naruto. I have been doing things with that. You've been running independent surveillance. I've been observing. There is a distinction. I'm not complaining, Naruto said. That's actually very useful. I'm aware, Kurama said. He left for the southeast staging point at mid-morning, telling Kakashi he was going for extended training in the forest and would be back by evening. Kakashi looked at him with the one eye that had seen enough over the years to know when extended training was a shorthand for something else, and said, simply, be back by evening, which was Kakashi's way of saying I trust you and also I'll come find you if you're not back. He ran through the forest at the pace that felt natural now, fast enough to cover ground efficiently, careful enough to move without disturbing the forest's ambient chakra patterns, which was a skill he hadn't known he had until Fenrakan started teaching him to feel the world's chakra as texture rather than just presence. The forest had a rhythm. The trees, the soil, the water running through underground channels, the animals and the canopy, all of it was generating tiny amounts of chakra the way all living things generated chakra, and the combined effect was a kind of ambient music, a signature as distinctive as a person's. He moved through it like he belonged to it. Because he did. He always had. He just hadn't known how to feel it properly before. He found the staging point in a hollow between two ridges, a cache of supplies under a modified camouflage seal, well constructed, the kind of seal work that required skill and practice. Someone had spent real care on this, which told him the person responsible took their work seriously regardless of what the work was for. He felt Muriai's chakra signature 40 minutes before she arrived. He sat at the base of a cedar tree about 30 meters from the cache and waited. He wasn't suppressing his chakra. He wasn't hiding. He was simply sitting, in plain sight, in the quiet of the forest, in the warm mid-morning that filtered through the canopy in long gold shafts. She came through the trees with two other operatives flanking her, and she stopped when she saw him, and the two flanking operatives had weapons deployed before the stop was complete. Muriai held up a hand and they froze. She looked at him. He looked at her. She was older than he'd pictured from the descriptions, not old, but carrying age around her eyes the way people do when they've been thinking hard and sleeping little for a long time. Her chakra was impressive, contained, layered, dense in the way of someone who had spent decades compressing it for precision work rather than raw output. Sealing work built that kind of density. He recognized it from Kakashi's lectures on specialist chakra profiles. Uzumaki Naruto, she said. Elder Muriai, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, you're not supposed to know my name. Jiraiya-sama's network is thorough, he said. I think I said that to one of your people already. She studied him. The two flanking operatives were still, weapons ready, watching him with professional attention. He noted this without concern. Their readiness was a courtesy to them. If they needed it, it wouldn't help them, but taking it away preemptively would be rude. You're not what we were briefed on, Muriai said. What were you briefed on? An unstable Jinchuriki with a catastrophic power level. Potentially willing. Potentially not. Someone who represented the same kind of threat we were built to address. She looked at his hands, at the faint silver-blue trace at the edges. You've been sitting here for how long? 40 minutes. In the open. In the open, he confirmed. Not suppressing your chakra. I never suppress it, he said. What would be the point? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, to the two operatives, rest position. Stay at the perimeter. They moved back without question, and she came a few steps closer, not sitting, but closer, the body language of someone who was being cautious and honest about being cautious simultaneously. Why are you here? She asked. Because you have doubts, he said. And I need someone with doubts to carry a piece of information to Kazan before he makes a decision with it. She looked at him sharply. What kind of information? The sealing scripture he has, Naruto said. The weapon built from the first sealing doctrine. He doesn't know what it actually does. He thinks it's a containment tool. It's not. He held her gaze. An imperfect application of that scripture doesn't just seal a target. It collapses the local spacetime. It takes everything in range with it. He paused. Everyone in range. The forest was quiet. He has contingency plans for, Mirai started. That assume the weapon works the way he thinks it does, Naruto said. It doesn't. He reached into his jacket and produced a scroll. He'd spent the previous evening condensing Fenrakan's explanation of the sealing mechanics into written form, which had taken 3 hours and multiple failed drafts because turning ancient cosmic knowledge into legible notation was significantly harder than it sounded. This is a transcription of the original mechanics, with a correction to the derived version. The error is in the third application node. The temporal anchor point was inverted in the translation, and the inversion doesn't just change the effect, it removes the directional control entirely. He held out the scroll. Mirai looked at it. Looked at him. Looked at the scroll again. You came out here, she said slowly, to warn us. To warn you, he said. So that you can warn him. Why not come to the camp directly? Because he'd interpret it as me moving to eliminate the threat, Naruto said. Which is exactly what I told your operatives I wasn't going to do. Which you know, because you read every report they filed. She took the scroll. She held it carefully, the way a sealing specialist holds an unfamiliar scroll, thumb across the end cap, reading the exterior notation before committing to unrolling it. She read the exterior notation, which he'd written in standard sealing format, and something in her expression changed. This notation system, she said. Presage era, he said. The original sealing language. Not something the Covenant would have access to. He paused. The information in that scroll comes from the being who was sealed by the first sealing. The one Kazan's doctrine is derived from. She looked up from the scroll. Fenrakan. He's been in my head for about a week, Naruto said. He has opinions about what Kazan built from his containment scripture. The main opinion is that it's structurally unsound and dangerous to everyone in the vicinity. She was quiet for a long time. The forest moved around them, wind in the canopy, a bird making its argument somewhere to the east, the soft ongoing conversation of living things doing what living things do. Kazan lost people, she said finally. 12 years ago. I know, Naruto said. Jiraiya told me. The Northern Mountains. The primordial essence event. He blamed himself, she said, and her voice shifted, still professional, but with something underneath it now that wasn't professional at all. He blamed himself, and the only way he knew how to process that was to build a system that prevented it from happening again. A doctrine that could contain anything above the threshold. She paused. I joined the Covenant because the doctrine made sense to me. In the abstract. Power without constraint is historically catastrophic. It is, Naruto said. But it's not, she stopped. Looked at him directly. When Hana, the operative from this morning's team, filed her report, she said the chakra felt like something she'd been missing without knowing she was missing it. Like recognizing a word in a language she'd always spoken but never studied. She paused. I dismissed it as subjective contamination. Operatives who encounter high-level chakra sometimes experience a kind of awe response that can be misread as benevolence. But you didn't fully dismiss it, he said. She was quiet. You've been doing this for 19 years, he said. You know the difference between awe and recognition. You know the difference between being overwhelmed by something and being, he thought about the word Fenrakan had used. Remembered by it. She looked at him for a very long moment, and behind the professional stillness something moved, not breaking, not deciding, but considering, with the full serious weight of someone who had been considering for a long time and was finally allowing the consideration to be visible. I'll take it to him, she said. The scroll. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she said. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because if there's a structural error in the scripture and he doesn't know, the people who will pay for that are ours. She tucked the scroll inside her armor. The people he's trying to protect. I know, Naruto said. That's why I came to you. She turned to go, then stopped. What do you want from this? From all of it. If you could have exactly what you want, what is it? He thought about it honestly. Not the diplomatic version, not the version that would be most useful for her to carry back to Kazan. The honest one. A world where what I carry doesn't have to be a threat, he said. Where the kind of power that got divided up and weaponized and turned into political capital for 1,000 years can just be what it was supposed to be. Not a sword. Not a shield. Just something that lives in the world the way the world was supposed to work. He paused. I want Kazan to stop being afraid. Not because being afraid of me is insulting. Because being afraid like that costs him something. It costs everyone like him something. Another pause. That's not a thing I can take from him. He has to put it down himself. She looked at him for one more long moment. Then she walked back toward her operatives without another word, and Naruto sat at the base of the cedar tree and let the forest's ambient chakra move through his awareness like the notes of a song heard from a distance, familiar and vast and entirely at peace. Well done, Fenrakan said. We'll see, Naruto said. She has to actually reach him. She will, the wolf said. And he will read the scroll, and he will understand the structural error, and he will be very still for a very long time. And then? And then he will make a decision, Fenrakan said. The same decision everyone makes when they encounter something that breaks their framework entirely. They either rebuild the framework, or they double down, Naruto said. Yes. He stood up from the tree. Which do you think Kazan does? I think, the wolf said carefully, that Kazan is a man who has been looking for a reason to put down the burden he's been carrying for 12 years. But he will not put it down easily. He will need to be shown, not told, that there is somewhere safe to set it. Naruto started walking back toward Konoha. When the time comes, he said, I'll show him. The forest moved around him and above him and through him, and the gold morning light played in the canopy, and somewhere 40 kilometers northeast a man with a scar and a 12-year doctrine was about to read a scroll that would break his most foundational assumption, and the world continued its business of being complicated and alive and deeply, persistently, unreasonably worth the effort. He was halfway home when he felt the second chakra signature. Familiar. Controlled in the way of someone who had been trained to the absolute upper edge of human potential and then pushed past it through other means. The signature had something cold and sharp in its upper register, the signature of a technique that altered chakra nature through transplant rather than development. Naruto stopped walking. He hadn't felt this signature in the months since the valley. He'd known it was out there. Jiraiya's network had been tracking the movement of Orochimaru's company through the land of rice fields, and Sasuke's presence within it had been confirmed twice. But knowing intellectually and feeling it now, this close, in the trees 50 meters to his left, Sasuke, he said. The trees were still for a moment. Then Sasuke dropped out of the canopy and landed on a branch 10 feet off the ground, and they looked at each other across the space of a question that neither of them had finished asking yet. The curse mark was active, not the full transformation, but the level one spread across his neck and the left side of his face, the dark gray creeping toward his jawline. His Sharingan was on. He'd gotten stronger in the months since the valley, significantly stronger, the chakra profile altered in ways that were clearly Orochimaru's influence, the nature chakra suppressed and replaced with something sharper and more artificial. He looked at Naruto the way he'd looked at nothing else in Naruto's memory, with complete and undivided attention, the Sharingan reading every variable. You're not what I expected, Sasuke said. You've been watching, Naruto said. Since the valley. On and off. He looked at the silver-blue trace at Naruto's hands, at his eyes, at the way the ambient forest chakra oriented itself slightly toward him the way water orients toward low ground. The change is complete. Yeah. You came after me, Sasuke said. At the valley. You chose me over using the power to stop me. His voice was flat, analytical, working through something. Why? Because the power isn't the point, Naruto said. You're the point. Sasuke's jaw tightened. Don't what? tell you the truth. Don't make it sentimental, Sasuke said, and the edge in his voice was the edge of someone who had been using contempt as structural support for a long time and was feeling the structure test underweight. It's not sentimental, Naruto said. It's just true. He looked up at Sasuke on his branch, calm and direct and entirely unintimidated by the Sharingan or the curse mark or the new sharpness in the chakra signature. You matter to me. That's not sentiment. That's a fact I've decided is worth acting on regardless of what you do with it. Sasuke stared at him. Then he jumped down from the branch and landed on the forest floor 10 feet away, and the Sharingan was running at full capacity now, reading every variable in the way the Sharingan read things, not just the surface but the depth, the emotional architecture, the gap between what was said and what was meant. You're not afraid of me, Sasuke said. Should I be? I'm stronger than I was at the valley. I know. Significantly stronger. I can feel it, Naruto said simply. You've been working hard. Orochimaru's getting what he wanted from you in terms of development. He paused. The cost is visible though. Sasuke's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, but Naruto had been reading Sasuke's almost imperceptible expression since they were 7. What cost? Sasuke said. Your chakra feels different. Not just stronger, different in nature. More artificial. More directed from outside. He met Sasuke's eyes. It feels like something that was yours got replaced with something that's on loan. The forest was quiet. Orochimaru's techniques, Sasuke started. Are his, Naruto said. Not yours. There's a difference between learning something and having it installed. He kept his voice flat, not accusatory, just observational. You've always been the kind of person who learned through understanding. Who had to know why something worked before you could use it. What you're doing with Orochimaru is different. You're taking power without the understanding because the understanding would take too long. I don't have time for Itachi, Naruto said. The name landed the way it always landed, like a door slammed in a silent room. Sasuke's Sharingan burned. Don't say that name to me like you understand. I don't understand it, Naruto said. I don't understand what you carry. I've never pretended to. He took a step forward, and Sasuke's hand went to the hilt of his sword, and Naruto kept walking because the sword was information about fear and Sasuke's fear was something he had never been willing to exploit. But I know that what you're doing isn't going to work. Not because you're not strong enough. Because Orochimaru's power is a ceiling, and Itachi is above it. Sasuke's hand tightened on the hilt. How would you know where Itachi's ceiling is, he said, very quietly. Because Itachi's goal isn't to survive you, Naruto said. It never was. Whatever he did to your clan, whatever the real shape of that is, and I think you know more about the real shape than you've ever said out loud, his goal was never to keep you away. His goal was to make you strong enough. He held Sasuke's gaze. Strong enough for what? The question hung in the forest. And in the space of the question, he watched something in Sasuke's expression move, not break, nothing as dramatic as that, but move. The way ice moves in the first days of spring, not yet liquid, not yet free, but beginning to understand that the temperature has changed. Come home, Naruto said. It was simple. Direct. No performance in it, no plea, just the offer stated plainly. I'm not done, Sasuke said. I know. I'm not asking you to be done. I'm asking you to come home and be not done with people around you who give a damn. He paused. You can still go after Itachi. I won't stop you. But you don't have to do it the way Orochimaru wants you to do it. His way gives him what he wants from you, not the other way around. Sasuke looked at him for a very long time. The Sharingan was running its analysis, cataloging everything, filing every variable. But underneath the technique's cold efficiency, something else was running, something older and less calculated and entirely Sasuke, the part of him that had sat at a table in the academy and decided that this loud, unwanted, infuriating kid was the one person worth measuring himself against. "You're different," Sasuke said. "You said that. I mean it differently now." He looked at Naruto's eyes, the silver ring around the blue. "What you are now. Do you even know what it means?" "I'm working on it," Naruto said. "Does it?" Sasuke stopped. "Does it what? Does it change what you want?" Sasuke asked, and it came out harder than he intended, with the specific defensiveness of someone asking a question that matters to them and refusing to let that matter be visible. "Does it change what you're after?" Naruto looked at him. "I want you to come home," he said. "The power doesn't change that. Nothing changes that." Sasuke's hand came off the sword hilt. It was a small thing, barely visible, the kind of gesture that wouldn't register to anyone who wasn't watching for exactly that specific variable. But Naruto was watching for it, had always been watching for it, the moments when Sasuke's grip on the things keeping him upright relaxed even slightly, and you could see the person underneath the architecture. "I'm not coming home today," Sasuke said. "I know. I have things to finish." "I know that too." "Don't," he stopped again. "Start it again. Don't be in Konoha when I finish them." "If Itachi falls and there's still something left to settle," "There isn't," Naruto said. "But if you think there is, I'll be exactly where I always am." He smiled, and it was the real one, the unguarded one that he'd never been able to manufacture and never needed to. "I'll be home. Come find me." Sasuke looked at him for one more long moment. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees, moving fast and clean in the direction of the land of rice fields, and the forest closed behind him the way water closes over a stone, seamlessly, as if the gap had never been there. Naruto stood in the quiet and felt Kurama settle warmly in his chest. "That was the first real conversation you've had with him," the fox said. "Yeah," Naruto said. "He heard you." "Some of it." He started walking again, toward home, through the dappled forest light. "That's enough for now." "Is it?" Naruto thought about Sasuke's hand leaving the sword hilt. That small, barely visible gesture. "Yeah," he said. "That's enough for now." He walked home through the afternoon, and the forest sang its ambient song around him, and the combined weight of 40,000 years of memory and one fox's long evolution and his own stubborn unlost self moved through him like a tide, like breathing, like the most ordinary extraordinary thing in the world. Chapter 5, God and Brother Sasuke came back on a Tuesday. Not with fanfare. Not with the kind of dramatic arrival that the situation probably warranted given everything, the months away, the Orochimaru arrangement, the valley, all of it. He came back the way Sasuke did most things that actually mattered to him, quietly, without announcement, as if the absence of ceremony could protect him from the weight of what the moment meant. Naruto felt him cross the outer perimeter at 2 in the afternoon, moving through the eastern checkpoint with the particular chakra signature that had been the most familiar thing in his awareness since the academy and had been missing from it for months like a note dropped from a chord he'd been hearing his whole life. He was in the middle of a conversation with Tsunade about Murai's progress, or lack of it, or ambiguous progress, depending on how you read the silence from Kazan's camp over the past 72 hours, when the signature hit his awareness, and he stopped mid-sentence. Tsunade looked at him. "Sasuke," he said. She set down her pen. "Where?" "Eastern Gate." "He's not hiding. He was already standing. He's not suppressing his chakra. He walked through the checkpoint. He walked through the," she closed her eyes briefly. "Naruto. He's a missing nin. If Anbu gets to him before you do, then they'll follow me," Naruto said, and he was at the door. "I'm getting there first." He went through the window because the window was faster and because Tsunade's office was on the 3rd floor and the roof of the building next door was right there, and he moved across the rooftops toward the eastern district at a pace that was not performed, not dramatic, just the most efficient path between where he was and where he needed to be. He felt the ANBU response activating behind him, Tsunade was already on the communications channel. He could tell from the way the village's chakra web shifted, the way it always shifted when command-level decisions moved through the network. She was running interference. Buying him time. Which was the most useful thing she could do, and she knew it. He dropped into the Eastern District's main street 30 meters ahead of Sasuke. Sasuke stopped walking. They looked at each other across 30 meters of Afternoon Street, the civilian foot traffic parting around them with the instinctive awareness that people develop in shinobi villages for the specific quality of charged silence between two people who are about to have an important conversation. Sasuke looked different, and not in the way Naruto had expected. In the forest, 2 weeks ago, he'd felt the Orochimaru influence in the chakra signature, the artificial sharpness of transplanted power. That was still there, but muted. Not gone, but less dominant, as if something had shifted in the balance between Sasuke's own nature and the borrowed augmentation. The curse mark was not active. He looked tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has recently set it down and not yet adjusted to the new weight distribution of their own body. "Hey," Naruto said. "Hey," Sasuke said. A woman with groceries walked between them, looked at both of them, decided this was a shinobi problem and not a grocery problem, and kept moving. "You actually came back," Naruto said. "I said I wasn't coming back today," Sasuke said. "I didn't say I wasn't coming back." "Fair point." Naruto studied him. "Itachi?" Something moved across Sasuke's face. Not the compression he usually applied to anything involving his brother, this was different. Raw, in the way that things are raw when they've been covered for a very long time and the cover has been removed. "Dead," Sasuke said. The word landed between them. "I'm sorry," Naruto said. "Don't, I mean it," Naruto said. "I know it's complicated. I know what you went after him to do. But he was your brother, and he's gone, and I'm sorry." Sasuke looked at him. The Sharingan wasn't on. That was significant. Sasuke in a potentially dangerous situation without the Sharingan active meant he'd made a conscious decision to be here as a person rather than as a combatant. "There's more," Sasuke said. "I know," Naruto said. "Come in off the street and tell me." They walked through the Eastern District side by side, and the afternoon sun was low and golden and the village moved around them doing its business, and nobody stopped them, which meant Tsunade's interference was holding, and the walk had the specific quality of something that had been interrupted months ago and was now continuing, picking up mid-sentence, the way real things do when they're built from something genuine enough to survive a pause. Naruto's apartment hadn't changed. Sasuke stood in the center of it and looked around with the expression of someone calibrating, taking inventory of the evidence of another person's daily life the way you calibrate when you've been away from something familiar and need to re-establish the coordinates. The apartment was its usual modest disaster, mission reports in a stack that had tipped and been restacked, a coat over the back of the chair, 2 ramen cups on the counter that hadn't quite made it to the bin, a training scroll open on the table beside a notebook full of notation that was unmistakably Naruto's handwriting in the loose sprawling style he'd never bothered to formalize. "You're still terrible at keeping a clean space," Sasuke said. "It's organized," Naruto said, putting the kettle on. "Just not visibly." "That's not what organized means. It's what it means to me." He turned from the counter. "Sit down." Sasuke sat. Not in the chair, on the windowsill, which was characteristic, because Sasuke always positioned himself with an exit option even in the homes of people he trusted. Old habit. Deep-grooved. "Itachi," Naruto said, and left it open. Sasuke looked at the window for a moment. "Then, he was dying before I found him. Had been for a while, something progressive, something he'd been managing on his own." A pause. "He let me catch up to him. He could have stayed ahead of me forever. He chose to stop running." Another pause, longer. "We fought. He was all ready, he wasn't at full capacity and I didn't know it and I thought I was." He stopped. "I thought I'd gotten strong enough. I thought I'd finally, and then he died," Sasuke said, flatly. Before the fight was finished. Just, stopped. And Toby found me. Madara's former ally. He told me, his jaw tightened. He told me the truth about what the clan's destruction was. What it actually was. Naruto waited. Konoha ordered it, Sasuke said. The elders. Danzo. They gave Itachi the order because the Uchiha were planning a coup and they decided the political cost of the coup was higher than, he stopped. Higher than everything. And Itachi complied because they gave him a condition. They let me live. The words came out very flat and very controlled, the flatness of a container holding too much. He killed our entire clan to protect me and to protect Konoha, and then he spent the next decade letting me hate him so I'd get strong enough to, a long pause. So I'd be strong enough to survive what was coming. The kettle was doing its low whistle and Naruto took it off the heat and made tea without speaking, because this was the kind of information that needed room and adding words to the room too quickly would ruin the room. He brought the tea to the table and sat across from Sasuke's windowsill perch and waited. Sasuke looked at the cup he'd been handed. I don't know what to do with it, he said finally. It was perhaps the most honest thing Naruto had ever heard him say, because Sasuke always knew what to do, that was his whole construction, the person who identified the problem and moved toward its solution without deviation. I don't know what to do with it was the sentence of someone whose construction had been taken apart and who was, for the first time, genuinely at a loss. You don't have to do anything with it right now, Naruto said. People died, Sasuke said. My family. He killed them. That's real, Naruto said. That's real and it doesn't go away and I'm not asking you to make it not real. He looked at Sasuke steadily. But you also know the full truth of it now. And the full truth is different from the version you built everything on. It doesn't change what was done. No. But it changes what it means. He paused. And it changes what you build next. Sasuke looked at him. The light through the window was hitting the side of his face and the absence of the curse mark spread was stark in it, his skin was just skin, dark-haired and sharp-featured and tired, and the Sharingan stayed off, and he looked like himself in a way he hadn't in a very long time. What do you build, Sasuke said, when the thing you built everything toward was founded on a lie? You figure out what was real underneath the lie, Naruto said. And you build from that. He held Sasuke's gaze. You loved your family. That was real. You wanted to be strong enough to protect people. That was real. You wanted to be seen, by your clan, by Itachi, by anyone. He paused. That was real too. Sasuke said nothing. The revenge was the shape you put on real things, Naruto said. Take the shape away and the real things are still there. Sasuke looked at his tea. Picked it up. Looked at it. You sound different, he said. How? More, he seemed to weigh the word. Certain. Not arrogant. Just, he glanced up. Like you know where you are. First time in my life, Naruto said. What changed? What didn't change, Naruto said. Everything that was mine stayed mine. There's just more of it now. He turned his hands over on the table, the silver-blue trace faint in the afternoon light. Fenrakan. Kurama. Me. We're the same thing, now. Sasuke looked at his hands for a long moment. The wolf god, he said. You've been keeping track. Orochimaru has been keeping track, Sasuke said. He had people monitoring the valley event from a distance. He identified the celestial chakra signature. A pause. He wanted to study you. Of course he did, Naruto said, without heat. I told him no. This landed quietly. Naruto looked at Sasuke. I told him your chakra wasn't a resource, Sasuke said, and there was something in the precise delivery of it that suggested these were his exact words, not a paraphrase. And that his interest in it was the kind of interest that ends badly for everyone involved including him. What did he say to that? He suggested I was allowing personal attachment to compromise my analytical objectivity. And something moved at the corner of Sasuke's mouth. So small you'd miss it if you weren't watching specifically for the moments when the architecture went soft. I told him his analytical objectivity was indistinguishable from his inability to understand that some things aren't for taking. Naruto looked at him for a moment. Then I left, Sasuke said. You left Orochimaru. I'd gotten what I needed from him. A pause. The rest was a transaction he'd designed to benefit himself. I don't stay in transactions like that when they stop going both ways. Naruto thought about this, about Sasuke walking away from Orochimaru, from the power structure he'd spent months building toward, and the casual precision of the decision. No drama. No crisis. Just the identification of an unfavorable transaction and the exit from it. Come back to the team, Naruto said. Sasuke looked at him. Not as a condition of anything, Naruto said. Not with strings. Just, come back. Train with Kakashi. Let me drag you to Ichiraku's and watch you pretend you don't enjoy it. Be here. He paused. Whatever the Itachi situation needs from you in terms of processing, do it here instead of out there. The village, Sasuke said. The elders. Danzo. They gave the order. Yeah, Naruto said. And that's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not asking you to forgive them. I'm asking you to do the addressing from here instead of from out there. He met Sasuke's eyes. I'll be right next to you when you do. The afternoon was quiet around them, the apartment its usual modest self, the tea going slightly cold, the mission reports in their precarious stack on the counter. Sasuke looked at the window. Looked at Naruto. Looked at his tea. Tsunade, he said. She'll want accountability. She'll want a conversation, Naruto said. I'll be in that conversation with you. And so will Kakashi. He paused. You're not walking into that alone. A long silence. Then Sasuke said, very quietly, all right. Just that. All right. The whole enormous implicit weight of it, the months away, the valley, the mission, Itachi, Orochimaru, all of it, compressed into that single flat syllable, which was exactly how Sasuke did important things, without ceremony, without announcement, as if the size of the thing was irrelevant to the decision. Naruto nodded. Neither of them said anything else for a moment, and the afternoon did its ordinary golden things around them, and it was enough. The ANBU situation resolved itself less quietly. Tsunade had held the response for exactly as long as she could, which was longer than protocol strictly allowed and a measure of how thoroughly she trusted Naruto's read on the situation. When the formal response finally arrived at his apartment, 3 ANBU at the door, professional and carefully non-threatening, Naruto answered it before Sasuke could, which was a deliberate choice. He's under my direct guarantee, Naruto said, from the doorway. The lead ANBU, a woman in a wolf mask that he was pretty sure was Yugao, said, Hokage-sama requires, I know what she requires. Tell her I'll bring him in the morning. With Kakashi. He held the woman's gaze. Tonight he stays here. A pause. The ANBU consulted each other in the silent language of people who have worked together long enough not to need words for most operational decisions. Then Wolfmask said, Dawn, Uzumaki. Not a moment passed. Dawn, he confirmed. They left. Behind him, Sasuke said, You guaranteed my safety. Yes. You understand what that means if something goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong, Naruto said. That's not I know it's not a contingency plan, Naruto said. I'm telling you that I know it's not going to go wrong because I know exactly what the situation is and I'm going to be in the room when it happens. He turned back from the door. Tsunade trusts me. Kakashi will be there. And you're going to answer honestly. He looked at Sasuke directly. Which you will, because that's actually what you do when the framework is honest. Sasuke held his gaze for a moment. Then, you're annoying. You've said that about 900 times. Because it keeps being true. Naruto grinned and went back to the kitchen and started making actual food because the tea had gone cold and neither of them had eaten, and some situations were best navigated on a full stomach. He felt the Iron Covenant's move at midnight. Not a recon team. Not a surgical strike on perimeter infrastructure. This was the full deployment, 15 signatures moving in from the north and northeast simultaneously, with Kazan at the center, moving with a directness and speed that said this was not a reconnaissance operation. The chakra disruption device they'd used on the perimeter station had been replaced. He could feel the signature of the sealing scripture weapon from 2 kilometers out, and it was not the signature of a controlled, tested instrument. It was the signature of something armed. He was out of the apartment and on the rooftop before the thought fully completed. Below him, the first of Konoha's perimeter alarms went up, not the soft alert of an infrastructure approach but the full emergency activation, because whatever Kazan's team was carrying was registering on every chakra sensor in the network simultaneously. The scripture weapon, Fenrakan said. He's bringing it to you. He's not using it, Naruto said, moving north across the rooftops. He could have used it from the tree line. He's bringing it in person. Why? Because Muriai gave him the scroll. He was moving fast now, the silver blue and red-orange combined chakra rising to the surface without effort, a tide coming in because the moon was full and that was what tides did. He knows the weapon is structurally unsound. He knows the imperfect application could destroy everything in range. He dropped off the north wall and into the forest at a run. He's bringing it to the conversation. Not as a weapon. He stopped. Kazan was standing in the forest 40 meters ahead of him. Alone. The 15-person team was deployed in a perimeter roughly 200 meters out, held in position, weapons at rest. Kazan was alone at the center of an open clearing, wearing field armor that was functional rather than intimidating, carrying the scripture weapon in a sealed containment cylinder under his left arm. He was larger than Naruto had pictured from the descriptions. The scar on the right side of his face was visible even in the dark, decades old and fully healed, a clean line from jaw to temple that spoke of something sharp rather than explosive. He stood with the posture of a man accustomed to occupying space without apology, not aggressive, just substantial. He looked at Naruto with dark, direct eyes. You're alone, Naruto said. My team is at perimeter, Kazan said. They'll hold unless I signal. I know. I can feel them. Naruto looked at the containment cylinder. You brought the weapon. I brought it so you could see it. Kazan held it out slightly, not as a threat but as evidence. Your wolf's transcription was accurate. I had my best SEAL specialist analyze it over 72 hours. A pause. The third application node inverted. She ran 8 different projections on an imperfect application. Another pause. The minimum collateral radius is 400 meters. My village is within 400 meters, Naruto said. Yes, Kazan said. It is. The forest was very quiet. Above them the canopy moved in a light wind, and the moon was high and generous, and somewhere behind Naruto the first ANBU response team was approaching, which he noted and filed and didn't act on. Why did you come? Naruto asked. Because you were right, Kazan said. It came out flat and direct, the way someone says something they've been rehearsing the delivery of because the content requires care. The message you sent through Muriai. The offer to come ask. He looked at Naruto steadily. I'm here to ask. Naruto looked at him for a long moment. Then, all right. Ask. The Northern Mountains, Kazan said. 12 years ago. The Primordial Essence event. You know about it. Jiraiya told me. Then you know I lost people. His jaw tightened slightly. Not with grief, or not only with grief. With the specific tightness of someone who has been carrying the mechanics of an event for so long that the mechanics have become personal. 3 of my best field operatives. 11 civilians. I watched it happen. I watched a being whose chakra had no ceiling and no direction and no understanding of what was in its radius simply exist, and the existence alone was enough to, he stopped. To unmake people. Without intention. Without malice. Just because the scale of what it was made everything near it fragile. That being was dying, Naruto said quietly. Kazan's expression shifted. The primordial being in the northern mountains, Naruto said. Fenrakan has fragments of its identity in his memory. It was one of the last of the secondary celestial beings, not primordial like him, but older than the tailed beasts. It was dying. The chakra instability wasn't uncontrolled power. It was the chakra of something trying to hold itself together as it came apart. He paused. The casualties happened because your unit engaged it. The chakra response to a direct strike on a dying celestial being in that state, would have amplified the instability, Kazan said. His voice had changed, very slightly, in the upper register, the place where control starts to cost something. Like striking a structural fracture. Yes. We didn't know that. I know, Naruto said. You couldn't have known that. The knowledge of celestial chakra mechanics has been effectively lost for 10,000 years. There was no available briefing that would have told you what you were walking into. He held Kazan's gaze. What happened in the northern mountains wasn't your fault. Not in the way you've been carrying it. Kazan was very still. The forest held the silence carefully, the way forests hold things, without judgment, without conclusion, simply containing. That doesn't bring them back, Kazan said. No, Naruto said. It doesn't. And it doesn't change the fact that power at that scale, is genuinely dangerous without the right relationship to it, Naruto said. I'm not arguing with that. You're right about the principle. Power at this scale without accountability, without the right orientation to the people around it, without, he thought about Fenrakan's 40,000 years of patience, the wolf's long watching. Without genuine care for the fragility of the people nearby. You're right that power like that, handled wrong, is catastrophic. Kazan looked at him with sharp attention, the attention of someone who has been arguing against a position for 12 years and is now hearing a version of their own argument from the other side. You're saying you're not that, Kazan said. I'm saying I actively work at not being that, Naruto said. Every day. Not because I'm forced to. Because the people in my village are the whole point. He paused. The power isn't the purpose. They are. And if you make a mistake? Kazan said. The letter's language, direct. The scale of your chakra, if I make a mistake at this scale, Naruto said quietly, it matters. I know that. I don't need you to tell me that it matters. I live with the fact that it matters every minute. He looked at Kazan steadily. The difference between me and the being in the northern mountains isn't just that I'm trained or that I'm a vessel. It's that I have people. I have Konoha. I have, he paused. I have a reason to be precise. Something moved across Kazan's face, not resolution, not agreement, but something that preceded both of those things. The beginning of a recalibration. Your second-in-command thinks you should hear this conversation, Naruto said. Mirai thinks many things, Kazan said. She's usually right, isn't she? A pause. Then, with the briefest shadow of something that wasn't quite a smile, infuriatingly. From the combined space inside his chest, Fenrakan's voice came forward, not through Naruto's mouth, but the way it had in Tsunade's office that first night, resonating in the air itself, carried on the ambient chakra of the forest around them. Kazan. Kazan went very still. The containment cylinder was steady in his hands but the rest of him was not, the way a person is not still when they hear something they believed was myth speak their name. I know what you saw. I know what it cost you. The being you encountered was my distant kin, and it died badly, in pain, in a world that had no room for what it was. That death was a tragedy. Your response to that tragedy was to spend 12 years trying to prevent the next one. A pause, the wolf's pauses carrying the weight of geological time. That is not a small thing. That is not a wrong thing. Kazan's jaw was tight. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with anger. But the method you chose treats power as the variable and humanity as the constant. And the truth is the opposite. Power is the constant. It exists, in one form or another, in every creature that draws breath. What varies is the humanity. What varies is whether the one carrying it has something to carry it for. The forest absorbed this. Kazan looked at Naruto. It's speaking to me directly. He does that sometimes, Naruto said. He has 40,000 years of things he's been waiting to say. Does he always? Kazan stopped. Started again. Does he always speak about humanity like that? Like it's the factor worth optimizing for? Always, Fenrakan said, still in the air. Every version of the argument, at every point in the world's history, comes down to the same question. What is the power for? And the only answer that has ever produced something worth keeping is, for the people who are here. For the one standing in front of you right now. Kazan looked at the containment cylinder in his hands. He looked at it for a long time. Then he set it down on the forest floor. Not with drama. Not with ceremony. The careful, deliberate setting down of something heavy that has been carried for a long time. What do I do with it? He said. I can take it apart, Naruto said. The scripture weapon. The mechanics of it. It should be dismantled, not stored. He paused. Not because it's a threat to me. Because it's a threat to anyone near it if Kazan's team is deployed in the wrong engagement with the wrong information about its actual parameters. Kazan looked at him. You do that. Destroy the only weapon capable of affecting you. It's not capable of affecting me the way you think, Naruto said. And I'd do it because it's dangerous to the people around me, and the people around me are the whole point. He looked at Kazan steadily. I said I'd answer your questions. That's my answer. Kazan was quiet for a very long time. Behind Naruto, he could feel the ANBU team holding position 50 meters back. Kakashi's signature among them, his sensei had arrived sometime in the last few minutes with the quiet precision of someone who had assessed the situation and determined that the right play was to be present but not intervening. Naruto felt a pulse of genuine gratitude for this. Sasuke's signature was back at the apartment, which told him Sasuke had stayed, which mattered in a way he didn't have time to fully feel yet. The Iron Covenant, Kazan said. What I've built. 19 operatives. Decades of work. A doctrine that, he stopped. A doctrine that I was certain was right. The doctrine isn't entirely wrong, Naruto said. Power without accountability is dangerous. Someone should be watching. Someone should be willing to act if the watching shows something genuinely catastrophic. He paused. But the watching doesn't have to be adversarial. And the acting doesn't have to be elimination. What does it have to be? Honest, Naruto said. The same thing everything has to be. Kazan looked at him. I'm not asking the covenant to dissolve, Naruto said. I'm asking it to update its threat model. He held the older man's gaze. I'm asking you to extend the same precision you applied to the scripture weapon analysis to your fundamental assumption about what I am. A long silence. Then Kazan said, very quietly, who are you? And Naruto understood that this was not a question about name or village or mission classification. This was the actual question, the one that had been building since the valley, since the recon teams, since Muriai's supply run, since the letter, the question that 12 years of doctrine had been trying to answer and hadn't. Naruto Uzumaki, he said. From Konoha. I want to be Hokage someday. I eat too much ramen and I'm not great at paperwork. He paused. I carry a wolf god and a nine-tailed fox and all the chakra you can imagine, and I still can't sleep when it rains because I never got used to the sound of it growing up. He looked at Kazan directly. I'm not a category. I'm a person. And every person with power at every scale is the same fundamental question: what do they do with it? Kazan held his gaze for a long moment. Then, and you? And me, Naruto said. I make ramen my primary food group and I look after the people who are mine, and I'm going to spend my life making sure the things that hurt because they were handled badly are handled differently. A pause. That's not a mission statement. That's just who I am. The forest held this. Kazan bent and picked up the containment cylinder. He walked forward and placed it in Naruto's hands. It was heavy, purpose-built containment engineering, dense with sealing work layered into the metal itself, the kind of craft that took years to develop. He held it and let the combined chakra move through his awareness and feel the scripture weapon inside it, the inverted temporal anchor, the structural flaw, the enormous destructive potential of a tool built for misunderstood preservation. He looked at Kazan. Thank you, he said. Kazan met his eyes. If you make a mistake, I know, Naruto said. If the scale of it, I know, Naruto said again. And if that day comes, I want you watching. I want someone like you watching. Someone who cares enough to have built 19 years of preparation for the possibility. He held Kazan's gaze. But I'm asking you to watch with the correct information. Something in Kazan's expression settled, not resolution, not peace, but the beginning of both, the early phase of a very long process of rebuilding a framework from more accurate materials. Muriai will be pleased, he said. She's usually right, isn't she? Naruto said. The shadow of a smile, genuine, brief, carrying 12 years of earned weariness and something that hadn't been present in his face before. Infuriatingly, he said again, and this time the word had different weight. He turned and walked back into the forest toward his perimeter, and his team folded in around him, and they moved north through the trees at an unhurried pace, and Naruto stood in the clearing with the containment cylinder in his hands and listened to them go. Kakashi landed beside him. That was either, his sensei said, the most effective diplomatic engagement I've witnessed in 20 years of active service. A pause. Or the most dangerous thing you've ever done. Could be both, Naruto said. Is that a concern to you? Not really, Naruto said. He looked at the cylinder. Can we get this to Tsunade's seal specialists tonight? I want it dismantled before morning. I'll arrange it. Kakashi looked at the direction Kazan had gone. Do you trust him? Naruto thought about this honestly. I trust that he'll do exactly what he said. Watch. And act if there's something genuine to act on. He paused. That's not blind trust. That's accurate trust. There's a difference. Kakashi was quiet for a moment. Then, Sasuke's back. I know. Tsunade is going to require a formal accountability process. I know that too. And you're going to sit in that room with him. Already told him I would. He turned and started walking back toward the village. You're in that room too. I already decided. Kakashi made the sound that served as his version of a laugh, quiet, brief, genuine. You already decided. You'll be there, Naruto said. You're his sensei. He needs you in the room. What about what I need? Kakashi said. Naruto looked at him sideways. You need to be in the room, he said. You've been needing to be in that room since the valley. Since before the valley. He held Kakashi's gaze for a moment. He came back. That's the thing you've been carrying since he left, the possibility that he wouldn't. He did. Kakashi was very quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. He did. They walked back into the village, and above them the stars were doing their usual patient spectacular work, and the combined chakra moved through Naruto in its tied rhythm, warm and cool and entirely settled, and Fenrakan was quiet with the deep quiet of someone who has carried a very old hope for a very long time and has just watched the first real step of it come true. Well done, the wolf said. Naruto walked through the village gate with the containment cylinder under his arm and his sensei at his shoulder and his village around him, all of it his, all of it worth every bit of what it cost. "Thanks," he said. "Are you talking to me?" Kakashi asked. "Both of you," Naruto said. Kakashi looked at him. "It's a three-way conversation sometimes," Naruto said. "You get used to it." "I'm not sure I will," Kakashi said. "You will," Naruto said. "Give it a week." Chapter 6, The Celestial Verdict. 3 days after Kazan's visit, Danzo moved. Nobody saw it coming because Danzo had spent 50 years making sure nobody saw anything he did coming, and he was very good at it, in the way that people are very good at things they've practiced long past the point of conscience. He didn't announce himself. He didn't send a message. He simply activated root. Naruto felt it at 4 in the morning, not the activation itself, which happened somewhere beneath the village's official chakra web in the suppressed network that root used as its operational layer, but the consequence of it. 17 chakra signatures, uniformly suppressed to almost nothing, moving through subsurface tunnels toward specific points in the village's infrastructure. Not the outer perimeter. Internal targets. The Hokage Tower. Tsunade's residence. Jiraiya's current temporary lodging. And his apartment. He was already awake. He'd been awake since 2, sitting on the roof in the pre-dawn dark with his hands loose in his lap and the combined chakra moving through him in its tied rhythm, in the specific wakefulness that arrived sometimes and didn't require explanation. He felt the 17 signatures branch toward their targets and understood the geometry of it in one clear assessment. Root wasn't coming to engage him. They were coming to create leverage. He was off the roof in the same motion. 17, Kurama said. Split 7 ways, Fenrakan added. 3 heading for the tower, 3 for the residence, 4 for the Toad Sage, 4 for your location, and 3 for Sasuke, Naruto said. He'd been moved to the secure guest quarters in the Hokage Tower's east wing after the formal accountability meeting 2 days ago, a decision Tsunade had made that was simultaneously protective custody and a gesture of good faith, which was the kind of two-handed political move that she was better at than anyone gave her credit for. If Danzo was targeting the tower and Sasuke was in the tower and the accountability process had just begun, he moved through the village at a pace that wasn't running so much as a sustained expression of intent, the kind of speed that didn't look hurried because hurry implied uncertainty about the destination and he had no uncertainty at all. The silver blue and red-orange combined chakra rose around him not as a display but as a readiness, the way muscles engage before a movement, simply because the movement was about to happen. He hit the Hokage Tower's east wall and went straight up it. The root operative assigned to the east wing was in the corridor outside Sasuke's room, moving with the specific silence of root-trained shinobi, the kind of silence that came from emotional suppression so total that even the biological noise of anxiety had been removed. Naruto came through the window at the end of the corridor and the operative turned and deployed a containment seal in one smooth motion. The seal hit Naruto's chakra field and dissolved. Not deflected. Not broken. Dissolved, the way salt dissolves in warm water, completely, without residue, absorbed into the larger system without producing any discernible reaction in the larger system. The operative went still. How many in the building? Naruto said. The root operative didn't respond. Root-trained personnel had a specific psychological conditioning that made direct interrogation pointless. They'd been built to take information in and not let information out, which was one of the more honest metaphors for what Danzo had done to the people he'd recruited. Okay, Naruto said. You're going to stand here and not do anything else tonight. That's the best option available to you. He put the operative against the wall, gently, firmly, with the specific confidence of someone who doesn't need force to establish authority, and went to Sasuke's door. Sasuke was already awake. Because of course he was, Sasuke's threat awareness had been calibrated to a hair trigger since childhood, and whatever Root thought about the quality of their suppression, Sasuke could feel a hostile chakra signature through 3 walls of a building he'd been living in for 48 hours. He opened the door before Naruto knocked. Root, Sasuke said. In the tower and 4 other locations simultaneously, Naruto said. Danzo's moving. Something passed across Sasuke's face, not surprise, not exactly, but the specific quality of having an old understanding confirmed. He knew I was back. He knew the accountability process had started. And he knows that when it finishes, the question of who gave the order for your clan becomes the next conversation, Naruto said. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. He's not wrong to move. He's wrong about what moving accomplishes, Naruto said. Come on. They went into the corridor, and the root operative was still against the wall looking at the middle distance, and Sasuke glanced at them and said nothing, and they moved toward the tower's main staircase at a pace that was fast without being rushed because the situation required speed and precision simultaneously. Naruto reached out through his chakra awareness and ran the count. The three heading for Tsunade's residence had been intercepted. He felt the sharp focus signatures of her personal guard activating, which told him she'd been awake and prepared, which told him she was Tsunade. The three at Jiraiya's location had also met resistance. Jiraiya's chakra signature had flared in a way that suggested someone had found their way into a situation they didn't have the chakra budget for. Jiraiya's budget was, as always, vast. That left the four heading for his empty apartment, which were going to arrive at an empty apartment and have to file a very disappointing report, and the three in the lower reaches of the tower itself. He felt those three clearly now, moving through the basement level, heading for the tower's primary chakra relay. The relay that powered the village's entire sensor network. If they disrupted it, Konoha would be effectively blind for the 30 to 40 minutes it would take to switch to the backup system. Tower basement, he said. Relay, Sasuke said immediately. Yeah. They took the stairs at speed and hit the basement level to find two of the three root operatives already at the relay housing, one working a disruption seal into the panel while the other held position, and the third at the stairwell entrance with a containment barrier that was professionally constructed and entirely insufficient for the present company. The third operative deployed the barrier. Naruto walked through it. Again, not dramatically, not with visible effort. The barrier simply ceased to be a relevant factor, absorbed by the combined chakra field the way the seal in the corridor had been absorbed. He watched the operative's professional composure hold for exactly 2 seconds after the barrier went down, which was genuinely impressive. Stop, he said to the two at the relay. They didn't stop. Root conditioning, again. They kept working the disruption seal with the focused efficiency of people who had been told to complete the objective regardless of circumstance and had no remaining capacity for circumstance. Sasuke moved past him, and Naruto let him, because this was Sasuke's to handle and he knew it. Sasuke crossed the basement in 4 strides, the Sharingan on and reading every variable, and he took the operative's wrist with the precise grip of someone who has spent years learning exactly how much pressure produces exactly the required outcome. He applied the genjutsu, quick, clean, targeted, and the operative stopped working the seal and stood there in the particular stillness of someone whose consciousness had just been temporarily reorganized. The second operative came off the relay and came at Sasuke, and Naruto stepped in at the angle before the engagement could develop into something that would damage the relay housing, which was what they were here to prevent. He caught the operative's strike on his forearm. The strike had real power behind it, the strike of someone at the upper edge of human training, and held it, and looked at the operative, and let a fraction of the combined chakra come to the surface of his skin. Just a fraction. The warmth of it. The depth of it. The operative went still in the way that Kazan's people had gone still in the forest, the involuntary stop of a physical system encountering something it doesn't have a category for. Sit down, Naruto said. The operative sat down. Sasuke deactivated his genjutsu on the first operative and let them find their feet, and Naruto looked at all 3 root agents in the basement and considered the situation. You're not going to tell me anything about Danzo, he said. I know that. Root conditioning is thorough. He looked at each of them. But I want you to hear something, and I need you to carry it back to whoever you report to when this is done. He held the room's attention. Danzo moves in the shadows because the shadows are where his methods work. What I do doesn't work in the shadows because it doesn't need to. There are no shadows big enough. He paused. Tell him that. Tsunade was in her office when they arrived, which meant she'd been in her office the entire time, which meant she'd known something was coming before the root signatures even activated, which was exactly the kind of strategic awareness that explained how she'd survived 50 years in the most politically complicated hidden village in the world. She looked at Naruto and Sasuke in the doorway and her expression said she'd expected exactly this. Danzo, she said. 17 root operatives, Naruto said. 5 targets. All neutralized. Casualties? None. She looked at Sasuke. The accountability process starts its formal phase today instead of tomorrow, she said. I was going to wait another day to give you time to, I was going to wait. But tonight changes the timetable. She held his gaze. Are you ready? Sasuke stood in the doorway of the Hokage's office at 4:30 in the morning, 3 days back from a mission that had been his entire identity for most of his life, and he looked at Tsunade with the expression he wore when he was being exactly honest. Yes, he said. Kakashi arrived 9 minutes later, slightly winded, his book in his vest pocket, which meant he'd been reading it before the alarms and hadn't had time to put it somewhere more dignified. He came through the door and looked at Naruto and Sasuke and Tsunade, and something in his face did a complicated thing, and then he went very still and very controlled in the specific way Kakashi was controlled when something mattered enormously and he was managing the size of it. You're here, he said to Sasuke. I'm here, Sasuke said. A pause. Good, Kakashi said. Just that. Good. All the weight of every mission, every failure, every choice at the valley compressed into one syllable with the same efficiency Sasuke had used for all right 3 days ago, which was maybe where Sasuke had learned it. Naruto sat in the chair to Sasuke's left. Kakashi took the chair to his right. Tsunade settled behind her desk. The conversation that followed was long and honest and difficult and occasionally very quiet in the way that necessary things are quiet, and Naruto stayed the entire time, and Kakashi stayed the entire time, and the sky outside the office went from black to gray to the first tentative pink that came before dawn. Danzo sent an envoy by mid-morning. Not himself, Danzo didn't do things directly when a layer of distance was available, which was the whole logic of route. The envoy was a mid-level political operative, impeccably dressed, carrying a prepared statement about unauthorized route activity and regrettable miscommunications and the need for continued unity within Konoha's leadership structure. Naruto sat in Tsunade's office and listened to it and felt Kurama's dry assessment of the prepared statement from inside his chest. Every word of it, Kurama said, is technically accurate and completely false. I know, Naruto said quietly. Did you say something? The envoy asked. I was saying I've heard the statement, Naruto said. Does Danzo want to have this conversation in person? The envoy looked uncertain. Lord Danzo's position is that he can maintain distance while his operatives do his work, Naruto said, without heat. That's been his position for 50 years and it's worked because the variable it depends on is the cooperation of the people he's operating around. He looked at the envoy steadily. That variable has changed. The envoy processed this. In what way? Tell him to come to the table, Naruto said. Tsunade-sama's table. Today. To talk about the Uchiha clan's destruction and who gave the orders and what accountability looks like for that. He paused. I'll be in that room too. Your presence is not, you are not in an official capacity that would, I'll be in that room, Naruto said again, and the combined chakra rose around him, not threateningly, not even noticeably unless you were paying close attention, but noticeably enough. That's not a request. The envoy looked at the faint silver-blue trace at the edges of him and arrived at the decision that this was a message to deliver rather than an argument to win. I'll convey the invitation, the envoy said. Good, Naruto said. They left. Tsunade looked at him from behind her desk with an expression that was not quite amusement and not quite exasperation but carried elements of both. You just summoned Danzo. He can come or he can watch the accountability process proceed without his version of events, Naruto said. Either way the process proceeds. He'll try to, I know what he'll try, Naruto said. Let him try. The room will be honest or it won't, and if it isn't I'll know, and if I know he'll know I know. He looked at Tsunade. He's used to operating in the dark. The thing about what I am now is that dark isn't a functional variable anymore. She looked at him for a long moment. You're going to push until the whole Uchiha massacre order is on the table. It's already on the table, he said. It's been on the table since Sasuke walked through the gate. The only question is whether the people who put it there are in the room when it's addressed. She studied him. You know what that means for the village's political stability. Yes. For the elders. For the existing power structure. Yes. And you're doing it anyway. Sasuke came home, Naruto said. He came home and he told the truth. The least the village can do is tell the truth back. Tsunade was quiet for a while. Then she said, you know, when I came back to this village, I thought I was coming back to manage a political situation. She looked at him with the expression she used when she was being fully honest. I didn't realize I was coming back to watch a kid I barely knew remake everything from the ground up by simply refusing to leave anything important unaddressed. I'm not remaking anything, he said. I'm just not ignoring things. That is, historically, the same thing, she said. Danzo came at 2 in the afternoon. He came with his walking stick and his bandaged arm and the particular deliberate slowness of a man who understood that the pace at which you move through a room conveys information, and who had spent decades curating the information he conveyed. He looked at Naruto in the corner of Tsunade's office with the careful assessment of someone encountering an unknown variable for the first time in person. Naruto looked back. Danzo said nothing for a moment. Then, Uzumaki. Danzo-san, Naruto said. The man was old and very skilled and had spent 50 years building a version of Konoha's safety on a foundation of methods that were effective and terrible simultaneously, which was perhaps the most complicated kind of person to assess. His chakra was dense and controlled and layered with suppression seals that were built into his flesh rather than applied externally, which told you everything you needed to know about the relationship between Danzo and subterfuge. He looked at Naruto the way people looked at Naruto sometimes, trying to find the ceiling, trying to find the place where the power ran out and the ordinary thing was underneath. The Sharingan under the bandages was reading every variable. You wanted this meeting, Danzo said. Tsunade-sama wanted this meeting, Naruto said. I'm here because Sasuke Uchiha is owed an honest room, and I intend to make sure he gets one. You intend, Danzo said. You are a genin. The chain of, I'm aware of what the chain of command says about my role in this meeting, Naruto said. And I'm telling you that my role is what it is regardless of what the chain of command says. He met Danzo's eyes. You gave the order for the Uchiha massacre. You and the elders. You made that decision and Itachi Uchiha paid for it with everything he had for 13 years and then died paying for it. He kept his voice even. That's what this room is about. Danzo looked at him. The Sharingan was reading everything. Let it read. He had nothing to hide. The Uchiha were planning a coup, Danzo said. Yes, Naruto said. They were. And that was a genuine threat that required a genuine response. He held Danzo's gaze. The genuine response was not the massacre of an entire clan including civilians and children. The genuine response was the one Itachi wanted, negotiation, political resolution, addressing the underlying grievance that had driven the Uchiha into a corner in the first place. He paused. You chose the version that removed the threat permanently, at a cost Itachi carried alone, and then you built a political structure that depended on that cost never being publicly acknowledged. Danzo was very still. The Uchiha's grievance, Naruto continued, was that they were being treated as a threat to be managed rather than a clan to be part of the village. You resolved that grievance by confirming it was correct and then eliminating everyone who'd experienced it. He paused. I'm not here to punish you. That's Tsunade-sama's role. I'm here to make sure that the room is honest enough that the punishment, when it comes, is the right one. The room held the weight of this. Danzo looked at him for a very long time. The Sharingan was running, reading. And then something in the old man's expression shifted. Not capitulation. Not remorse. Danzo was the kind of person who had long since converted remorse into methodology, which was its own tragedy. But something that acknowledged the quality of the obstacle. You are not what I expected, Danzo said. I know, Naruto said. The power alone is not what makes this room difficult for you, Naruto said. What makes this room difficult is that you've been operating in a world where the people in your way could be managed or removed or redirected. And I'm none of those things, and you know it, and you came anyway. He paused. That took something. Danzo looked at him. Come to the table, Naruto said. Tell the truth. Let it be what it is. A very long silence. Then Danzo crossed the room and sat at Tsunade's table, and Tsunade looked at Naruto once, the brief, eloquent look of someone acknowledging something significant without making a production of it, and the meeting began. It took 4 hours. Naruto sat in the room and didn't speak much. Didn't need to. He'd said what the room needed to get started, and Tsunade was the one who ran it from there, because that was her role and she was extraordinarily good at it. Kakashi gave testimony. Sasuke gave testimony in the flat controlled way of someone who had decided that the truth was the instrument and was using it with precision. Jiraiya, summoned back from research, gave testimony about what he knew of the original order. Danzo talked. Not freely, Danzo never talked freely, but with the specific quality of someone who has calculated that the alternative to talking is worse, and who, underneath the calculation, might be tired. Tired in the way of very old people carrying very old decisions. Tired in the way that had nothing to do with sleep. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't even close to a resolution. Resolutions took longer than 4 hours and required institutional change and political restructuring and the kind of sustained effort that was measured in years rather than afternoons. But it was honest. That was the thing. The room was honest, for the first time, about what had happened and who had decided it and what it had cost. And honest rooms, even painful ones, were the only rooms in which anything real could be built. When it ended, Naruto walked out into the late afternoon with Sasuke beside him and Kakashi behind them, and the village was doing its end-of-day business all around them, and the light was the gold that came in from the west at this hour and painted everything briefly beautiful. Sasuke was quiet for a long time as they walked. Then, thank you. For what? For making sure the room was honest. That's what rooms are for, Naruto said. Sasuke looked at him sideways. You know that most people don't think that. Most people are wrong about most things, Naruto said. It's a consistent pattern. They walked in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that was actually full rather than empty, that contained everything they'd been through in the last several months without needing to itemize it. Hokage, Sasuke said. What? You said you want to be Hokage. He was looking ahead, not at Naruto. You'll be good at it. Naruto looked at him. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. It's a factual assessment. Still the nicest. Don't make it sentimental, Sasuke said, with the tone. Too late, Naruto said, with the grin. Something moved at the corner of Sasuke's mouth that was almost certainly a smile and maintained complete deniability about being one. That night Naruto went back to the top of his father's face. He sat at the edge with his legs over the side and looked at the village below him, at the lights coming on one by one as the dark arrived, at the pattern they made that was specific and unrepeatable and entirely its own, the way all things made of people were specific and unrepeatable and entirely their own. He held the containment cylinder that hadn't been dismantled yet. Tsunade's seal specialists were scheduled for tomorrow morning, but he'd asked to keep it overnight, for reasons he hadn't fully articulated even to himself. He looked at it now. You want to understand it, Fenrakan said. I want to understand what she built, Naruto said. Bearer. The one who sealed you. I want to understand what the first sealing was actually supposed to be, before it got translated and retranslated and weaponized. A pause. Then Fenrakan did something he hadn't done before. He showed Naruto a memory that was not a memory of the world, not the celestial beasts across the double moonlit landscape, not the mechanics of primordial chakra. He showed him a memory that was personal. A clearing. Not unlike this one, forest, night, someone sitting quietly in the middle of it. A woman, not young, not old, somewhere in the middle of her life, with the specific stillness of someone who had been sitting with a decision for a very long time and had made it and was now in the quiet on the other side of making it. She was drawing sealing notation in the dirt with her finger, the notation that predated every sealing tradition Naruto had ever studied, the notation that Naruto had used on the exterior of the scroll he'd given Mirai. She was humming something. It didn't have a melody he could follow, but it had a feeling, and the feeling was the feeling of the woman operative in the forest when she described the chakra, the first real breath. The recognition of something that had been missing without your knowledge of its absence. She finished drawing the notation and placed both hands on the center of it and looked up at Fenrakan, at the wolf, enormous and present and entirely still, with the expression of someone doing a very difficult thing with complete conviction. "I'm sorry," she said. In the language that translated to nothing exactly, that Naruto understood by feel rather than by word. "Don't be," Fenrakan said. "It will be lonely. I've been lonely before." "The world will find someone," the wolf said. "Eventually." She pressed her hands to the seal and it activated, and the light that came from it was the silver blue that now lived in Naruto's chest, and she stayed with it until it was done, until the wolf was gone from the world in the form she'd known him, sealed away in the space between moments, waiting, and then she sat back in the clearing and the notation faded and she was alone. But she didn't look broken by it. She looked, Naruto thought, like someone who had just done exactly the right thing at exactly the right cost, and had made their peace with both. The memory ended. He sat on the Hokage rock with the containment cylinder in his hands and looked at the village lights and felt something that wasn't exactly grief and wasn't exactly gratitude but was the specific feeling that arrives when you understand, fully, the full length of the chain of things that led to where you are. 40,000 years, he said. Give or take, Fenrakan said. She'd be glad, Naruto said. That it worked. That you're here. A long pause. The longest pause Fenrakan had taken since the void, since the very first conversation in the space where the cage used to be. Yes, the wolf said, very quietly. I believe she would. From the other layer, warm and certain, we're here, Kurama said. All of us. That's enough. Naruto looked at the village below him and thought about everything. Kazan in the forest, the containment cylinder and what it was built from, Sasuke at the windowsill with his hand off the sword hilt, Danzo at Tsunade's table, Bearer in a clearing 40,000 years ago pressing her hands to a seal that nobody would remember. He thought about power and what it was for. He thought about the answer he'd given Mirai, a world where what I carry doesn't have to be a threat. He thought about how long things took. How nothing real happened quickly. How the gap between 40,000 years ago and right now was not a gap at all, just the length of time it took for one thing to find its way to another, for a beginning to find its end, for a question to find its answer. He set the containment cylinder down on the stone beside him and looked at the stars. Can I ask you something? He said to Fenrakan. Yes. What do you want? Now. From this. You waited 40,000 years. You've been in me for 2 weeks. You helped with Kazan and Sasuke and the root situation. But what is it that you actually want? For yourself? Another long pause. Then Fenrakan said, to see what you build. The simplicity of it was absolute. That's all, the wolf added. I have carried the memory of what the world was and what it could be for 40,000 years. I want to watch someone who understands both of those things decide what comes next. A pause. You. I want to watch you. Naruto sat with this. That's a lot of pressure, he said. You're used to pressure, Fenrakan said, and now the tone was unmistakable, dry and warm and full of the specific fondness of something very old for something very new that has turned out to be exactly what was needed. Fair point, Naruto said. Below him, the village was fully lit now, the pattern of its lights particular and unrepeatable, and the night was the night, full and patient, asking nothing. He stayed on the rock for a while longer, not thinking about anything specific, not planning or preparing or processing. Just being on top of his father's face in the dark above the village that was his, with the wolf and the fox settled in his chest like something that had always been there and had only recently been given its correct name. Then he stood up. Picked up the containment cylinder. Looked out at the dark line of the tree-covered hills to the east, where Kazan's camp had been and was now gone. He'd felt the Iron Covenant move their position 2 days ago, northeast, out of the Land of Fire's operational range, the movement of an organization that had received new information and was recalibrating in response. Not disbanded. Not gone. Just recalibrating, which was the right response to new information and more than he'd expected. He looked north, in the rough direction of the sound, where the loose threads of Orochimaru's organization were unraveling now that Sasuke had left and the primary interest was gone. That was a problem for another day, but not a forgotten problem. He looked at the sky. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a genin running after a teammate at a waterfall with his headband gone and the Kyuubi's chakra burning through him and nothing in the world as simple as it had been that morning. 2 weeks ago the fissure had opened and the wolf had been waiting and the three of them had found each other in the void where the cage used to be. He didn't feel like the same person. He felt like more of the same person. Like the version of himself that had always been possible and had never quite been permitted until now. He walked back down the Hokage rock, not hurrying, not slow, at the pace that was simply his, and through the village that was simply his, and the lights burned in their particular unrepeatable pattern, and somewhere a baker was starting an oven for tomorrow's bread, and a couple was arguing loudly about something in an apartment above the paper shop, and a genin team was coming back late from a training session in the forest, laughing about something, 3 of them, moving the way teams move. When they've been together long enough to share a rhythm. He stopped and watched them pass. The 3 genin looked at him as they went by, the silver ring in his eyes, the faint luminous trace at his hands, whatever else had changed about him that people registered before they knew what they were registering, and one of them, the smallest one with big ears and a brash, unfinished quality that reminded him sharply of something, said, "Hey, is that?" "Yeah," one of the others said. "That's Naruto-san." The small one looked at him with wide, uncalibrated eyes. The look of someone new to this business, not yet cynical, not yet aware of which expressions to suppress and which to deploy strategically. "What's it like?" the small one said. "Being that strong?" Naruto looked at him. The question was genuinely asked, in genuine curiosity, with no ulterior variable behind it. He thought about the answer. He thought about Fenrakan in the clearing, waiting. About Kurama in the cage, angry because anger was what the cage had left him. About Bearer pressing her hands to the seal. About Kazan setting down the containment cylinder. About Sasuke at the windowsill with his hand off the sword hilt. About Tsunade's roof, the village lights, the first real breath. "Honestly," he said. The 3 genin waited. "The strength isn't the thing," he said. "The strength is just what happened. The thing is," he paused, looking for the words, the right words, the ones that were true rather than the ones that were impressive. "The thing is knowing what it's for. And not forgetting. Even when it would be easier to." The small genin processed this with the specific serious attention of young people who have not yet learned to pretend to understand things they don't, and then nodded, and the 3 of them went on their way, and their laughter came back a moment later from around the corner, bright and ordinary and entirely itself. Naruto watched the corner where they'd turned for a moment. Then he turned toward Ichiraku's, because it was 10 at night and he hadn't eaten since noon and some things, regardless of the scale of your celestial chakra or the depth of your philosophical development, remained constant. Tucci was closing up when he arrived, but Tucci saw his face and reopened without a word, because Tucci had been feeding him since he was 7 and had developed a profound acceptance of the relationship between Naruto and the concept of reasonable eating hours. "The good broth?" Tucci asked. "Please," Naruto said. He sat at the counter and let the warmth of the place settle around him, the smell of broth and the sound of cooking and the particular golden light of Ichiraku's that had been one of the fixed points of his whole life, and ate his ramen slowly, for once, without urgency, without the compulsive speed of someone eating because they were hungry and lonely and in a hurry to be anywhere else. Just eating ramen. Just being here. Peaceful, Kurama observed. Yeah, Naruto said. You've earned it, said the fox. You have, Fenrakan agreed. Naruto looked at his bowl, at the broth catching the golden light, at his own hands resting on the counter, the calluses and the ink stain and the scar on the right knuckle and the faint silver-blue trace at the edges, all of it together, all of it his. He finished the bowl. Ordered another. Sat at the counter of the only ramen stand in the world that had never once been anything other than glad to see him, with the wolf and the fox settled in his chest like the most natural thing in the world had always been natural, and let the night be the night and the village be the village and himself be himself, whole and complete and unreservedly present. Outside, the stars were doing their patient work. The village breathed around him, alive and specific and entirely worth everything. And somewhere in the deep structure of the world, in the substrate that Chakra ran on and the celestial beings had once moved through without conflict, something that had been divided for 40,000 years quietly, without announcement, without ceremony, remembered itself.